Hello. How are you all doing today? I am doing great and I am with you. I am here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. It is Saturday evening and we are going to have a tremendous time. I'm glad you're all here. You're all glad I'm here. We have so much to talk about. It's a great time. It's a great moment. Folks, the DNC, the Democratic National Committee. Folks, my heart goes out to them. My heart goes out to them. They are in a rough spot. I would not want to be them in this moment. I would definitely not want to be the DNC at this moment. I can tell you, they have got themselves a situation on their hands with the Iowa caucuses approaching. They have absolutely no clue what they're going to do. I don't know how they're going to get out of this one. You know, the old Laurel and Hardy movies. You would say, it's a fine mess you've gotten us into, Stanley. A fine mess indeed. It's a fine mess that the Democratic National Committee has gotten itself into, Stanley. And it is a fine mess indeed. I have no idea how they are going to get themselves out of this one. Bernie Sanders is the front runner. Bernie Sanders is ahead in the polls. It looks as if no other Democratic candidate has the support that Bernie Sanders does. Bernie Sanders has raised more money than any of the other candidates also. He's got a flood of small donations. Bernie Sanders seems to be the candidate who is pulling ahead. And folks, what has been the grievance against Bernie Sanders for the past 4 years, 3.5 years? The grievance has been, how dare Bernie Sanders have run against Hillary Clinton? He spoiled the atmosphere. He made people like Hillary Clinton less. And as a result, some of these voters who voted for Sanders in the Democratic primary in 2016 voted for Trump. The party didn't line up behind Hillary Clinton. That's been their argument against Sanders from the beginning. But now we're in a situation where Bernie Sanders is the front runner. And folks like Joe Biden will not give a clear answer about whether or not they would back him if he becomes the nominee. So exactly what they accused Bernie of doing, which he didn't do, he told his supporters to vote for Hillary Clinton. They didn't all do it, but he told them to. What they have accused Bernie Sanders of doing, they are now doing themselves. What more? What more, folks? They now have a presidential debate among the Democratic candidates. And they have bent the rules in order to allow Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire, to be part of the debates. They have decided to bend the rules for Bloomberg. They're not bending the rules for Tulsi Gabbard. They're not bending the rules for Andrew Yang. But somehow, if you've got billions of dollars and you're a centrist and you used to be mayor of New York City, they can bend the rules to keep you in the debate. This, folks, is unprecedented. How is the DNC going to get through this? They're exposing themselves to be what they have been since the Democratic Party started. Where did the Democratic Party of the United States start? New York City. The very city that you are in. It was the Tammany Hall machine of New York City, going all the way back to the time of the American Revolution. That is where the Democratic Party started. The Democratic Party has always been and remains the party of corrupt urban political machines. It is the party of corrupt urban political machines, the Boss Tweed Tammany Hall machine of New York City, the Rizzo machine of Philadelphia, the Chicago Daily machine. It is urban political machines, the mafia, nepotism, corruption That is what the DNC and the Democratic Party has been from the beginning. And their politics have greatly, greatly shifted, right? New York City, where the Democratic Party got its start, during the U.S. Civil War, was the only stronghold of pro-Confederate sentiments in the country. The rest of the North was pretty solidly against slavery, but New York City, with some pretty notable exceptions like Horace Greeley and the New York Tribune that printed the writings of Karl Marx, the New York City establishment was solidly supporting the South during the U.S. Civil War. And why was that? Well, it was because of the fact that Wall Street is here in New York City, and Wall Street was making lots of money insuring cotton exports and selling slave-picked cotton to the British Empire. Wall Street thought that slavery was a great way to make money. Those exports to the British Empire, those slave ships. The DNC was not Republican. The DNC of 1864 wanted Lincoln out of office so that slavery could stay intact, so they could keep making money. The DNC was the party of Jim Crow. The DNC, I mean, you can go down. The Democratic Party is the party of urban political machines and the party of corruption. The Republican Party is the party of rural folks, farmers. Now, what's weird is that at one point the urban political machines were the right wing of American politics. That's true really up until, up until maybe, Woodrow Wilson, World War I era, up until that time, the DNC, because it was corrupt political machines owned by wealthy people, because it was the Jim Crow South, they were on the right. And the Republicans were the party of free land, free labor, and free men. Right? They took the name Republican because in 1848, Europe experienced the Spring of Nations, and uprisings were taking place all across Europe fighting for republicanism, the right to have a democratic republic. The Republican Party was the party of the French Revolution, of the flags, of the red flags, red. It was the party of abolitionists who wanted to abolish slavery. It was the party of free soilers. It was the party of organized labor. But it started to shift as the conservative movement, as conservatism started to become the ideology of people in small rural areas, right? As those rural folks were Protestants who didn't believe in drinking alcohol and dancing, and the urban centers became full of Roman Catholics from Italy, from Ireland, from Eastern Europe. The Republicans became the party of outlawing alcohol and prohibition. They became the party of conservatism. And the Democrats, because there were so many poor people and low-income people piling into those urban areas, low-income people who desperately needed jobs, and especially during the 1930s where you had the uprising and Roosevelt and labor unions, the Democrats became the liberal or left-wing party. The Republicans, because they were the party of the rural folks, became the party of conservatism, and that especially cemented itself when the northern wing of the Democratic Party led the charge to get rid of Jim Crow. The Kennedy family became the pro-civil rights wing of American politics. The northern Democrats moved to crush Jim Crow segregation, and what had been called the Solid South went firmly into the hands of the Republicans. And that's the shift. It's very, very weird. The demographics haven't changed. The Republicans are still the rural, farmer, small-town, red state party. The Democrats are still the party of corrupt urban political machines. However, the messaging, what the policy advocated by urban political machines and the policy advocated by rural, small-town folks has shifted. That change has taken place, but the parties remain the same. The United States is a two-party state in the same way that China is a one-party state, right? Sure, you can be in another political party in the United States. There's no law against it. You can be on the ballot, and sure, China has other parties. They do have other parties in China, right? But in order to really be part of the system, you must be part of the Democratic or Republican parties. And in China, in order to really be part of the system, you must be part of the Communist Party. When ballots are counted in local elections, they have an observer from the Democratic Party. They have an observer from the Republican Party. If there's another party, they don't have an observer from them. They're not even written into the rules, right? When they have debates allowing candidates, they have a candidate from the Democratic Party and a candidate from the Republican Party, and very rarely, very, very, very rarely will you find a debate where they will allow a candidate from a third party, even if that candidate from the third party is out polling the Democrat or Republican, right? Cindy Sheehan was polling far ahead of the Republican when she ran against Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco. But they did not include Cindy Sheehan in the debates. They did not even acknowledge her existence, even though more San Franciscans wanted to vote for her than for the Republican. She wasn't acknowledged. There's a whole history of this, folks. The USA is a two-party state. We have a Democratic Party and we have a Republican Party. And those parties are very, very broad coalitions that include all kinds of different interests and factions. And they're very, very confused and divided, but they're basically based on regions. The Democrats being the urban party and the Republicans being the rural party. That is the divide. It is the town and country divide. It is that divide that Karl Marx talked about abridging and getting rid of. In the Communist Manifesto, as he lists 10 planks, one of them is end the divide between city and countryside. Well, in the United States, we very much have a divide between city and countryside. And the city party is the Democratic Party, and the Republican Party is the rural countryside party. That is how American politics works. That's the situation we're in. Folks, I see JT24 saying party unity except for Bernie. I see that Kinky is with us. I see that many of us are here, and we are ready to talk about the situation facing the country on the eve of the Iowa caucuses. What an exciting time this is. Folks, I don't know how the Democratic National Committee is going to get itself out of this one. How are they going to figure it out? What are they going to do? It's a chess game, folks, and they may be facing checkmate. But unlike a chess game, the game doesn't end. The game keeps going. So something has to happen. Welcome, Jenny Lynn. Folks, before I get any further on this, now is the time to share this video, to share this link, bring other people on board. I'm seeing lots of comments from lots of people. I'm really glad you're here. Now is the time to tweet this out. Now is the time to hit the subscribe button and make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you're getting notifications. Hit the bell, because we know YouTube, it's not intentional. They do apparently have this algorithm that unsubscribes people. So make sure that you are still subscribed. Make sure they don't purge you from the subscribe list, number one. Make sure you hit the like button. And folks, be sure to share this. Tweet this out. Put this on your Twitter. Oh my God, what did Caleb just say? I love this. Join this conversation. Make it a bigger conversation. The more people that are here, the merrier. We are going to have a great conversation tonight. So much on my mind, so much on your mind. Keep in mind, I love those super chats. So if you got a super chat, feel free to throw it my way. I do appreciate it. And for those of you who are really excited about what we're doing here, mark your calendar for April 18th. April 18th, because in April 18th, I will be having a conference. The Center for Political Innovation, a think tank promoting socialist education that I'm helping to establish, is having its founding conference in Weehawken, New Jersey, just over the border, just over the river from New York City. And I hope that you can all be there. More information is coming. The website's being kicked off and launched. It's all in the works. But mark your calendar. Book your flight. Book your Greyhound bus. Be there. You don't want to miss it. All day mini conference, Weehawken, New Jersey. Very exciting stuff. You don't want to miss it. You want to be there. Pretty soon the website will be up and you can pre-register and sign up. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. I see Kinky has tweeted this out, and thank you, Kinky. I see other people are appreciating my comments about the DNC. I appreciate you too. That's why we're all here, because I don't know how the DNC is going to get out of this one. Maybe straight up election fraud is their only hope at this point. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to do that. I'm just saying maybe that's their only option. What can they do? They dug themselves a hole. They dug themselves a pretty deep hole with this one. They are They are up shit creek and without a paddle, it seems. It is an interesting situation for the Democratic Party's leadership, and I've got plenty to say about it. But before we get into that, why don't I do that thing? We all love that thing. Why don't I do that thing where you give me your name and location, and I call you out as I see you. I give you your 15 seconds of fame, and we become a great family here. I see Matthew Jones, Broadway, North Carolina. Who else is here? Name and location. Lawrence Chu in Albany, New York. Interview Joaquin Flores of Fort Russ. I would love to do that. Hello from Portugal. Stanley Stanlin in Long Island. Vicksburg, Mississippi, JT24. Ohio, Kevin Q. Cincinnati, Ohio. Jenny Lynn. Robert in Hawaii. Joshua Tree, California. Anthony Penza in Cleveland. Central New Jersey. Culver City, California. Toronto, Ontario. St. Louis. James in Seattle. Kami from Arkansas. Rick Fry. Hello from Chile. Miguel in Portugal. Exciting stuff, folks. Pittsburgh, says Sterling Archer. Clarence Darrow is in Schuyler, Utah. Osama is in Pakistan. Los Angeles, USA. Troy S. Space Communist. He's in California. Pacific Northwest, D.C. UK, London. Hello from the Philippines. Sunny San Diego. New Orleans. Rob in New Orleans. San Diego. Exciting stuff, folks. Wow. Hello, says Dylan Small. Well, hello to you, folks. Names and locations, keep them coming. I've got plenty more to say. Keep spreading the word, keep bringing people in. Amsterdam in the Netherlands. That's Joanne. Shout out to you, Joanne. Glad you're joining us. Salvador, Brazil. Lincolnite Yankee in Charlotte, North Carolina. I spent a month in Charlotte one time. Florida man here, says David Dwar. Very exciting. Very, very, very exciting. Fairhope, Alabama. Nicholas Lynch. Digital Slayer in Detroit, Michigan. A lot of great folks out there in Detroit. I spent a whole summer there once. Great stuff. I did an internship fighting home foreclosures. From Nowhere Land. From Amarda Makan. I don't even know what that means, but that's okay. It sounds like a great place if you're watching me there. Who all is with us? Names and locations, names and locations, names and locations. Sacramento, California, SC. Shaniqua from Buffalo. Glad you're with us, Shaniqua. Great to have you on board. Marissa from Buffalo. Glad you're with us, Marissa. Glad to have you. Welcome, welcome. Indonesia. Wisconsin, Friendship, Wisconsin. Ontario, Canada. Robert Exum in Friendship, Wisconsin. Mendocino, California. Fremont, California. Bob Marston, longtime friend of the show. Exciting stuff, folks. Exciting stuff. Wow. Well, now is the time, as I said before, to spread the word. Bring all your friends. I'm ready to talk about what you are wanting to talk about, what I'm wanting to talk about. So much to discuss. Bring all your friends. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Tully, Australia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Folks. Michael Moore, the filmmaker, is angry. He's very, very angry. I don't know if folks saw it on my Twitter. Helen from Venezuela. Great. Keep watching. I'm going to talk about Venezuela later. Folks, Michael Moore is furious about how they have bent the rules to allow Michael Bloomberg to be on the debate stage. He's furious about it. Michael Moore is furious about it. And I watched that clip of Michael Moore getting angry, and I thought, good, I agree with him. I agree. The anger is there. The fact that the Democratic primary seems to be clearly rigged. As we head into Iowa, as Bernie is the front runner, I do not blame Michael Moore for being furious. But I must say, Michael, do you think maybe you shouldn't have repeated the Russiagate stuff, that conspiracy theory that Trump won not because Hillary Clinton sucked as a candidate, not because there's lots of outrage around the Rust Belt states, like you've said in multiple documentaries, not because of the reasons you predicted yourself, but instead because of a vast conspiracy from Russia that has been largely debunked. Do you think Michael Moore regrets that? Do you think Michael Moore might regret carrying water for the people that are now rigging things to knock out his favorite candidate and to favor the rich and powerful? I mean, I must say, folks, Michael Moore is a complex figure, very complex figure. All right, now there are some things. There have been moments where I've watched Michael Moore and been on the edge of my seat applauding. I loved Bowling for Columbine. I absolutely loved the movie Bowling for Columbine. That was a tremendous work of cinematography. I watched that movie, and it was one of the best documentaries I had ever seen. It was really great. It got into U.S. gun culture. It got into U.S. militarism, U.S. society, settlerism, class divides. It was amazing. I didn't so much like Fahrenheit 9/11. Fahrenheit 9/11, I felt like it was like he didn't like George W. Bush, which I certainly didn't care for him either. But I felt like there were times where it kind of got slow. It was like he just kind of took everything but the kitchen sink and threw it at George W. Bush. Some parts of the movie were very powerful and moving. Other parts of it were a little bit dull. It is, I believe it is still the top grossing documentary of all time. And I remember the 2004 election very vividly. I was a teenager. I couldn't vote, but I campaigned for John Kerry. And I remember that election very, very vividly. And I remember how Pat Buchanan said that movie was very much Michael Moore versus Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson made Passion of the Christ, and Americans across the United States were piling in to see Fahrenheit 9/11. It became the top-grossing documentary of all time. Furthermore, I saw that Americans across the country were piling in to watch Passion of the Christ, which was this Mel Gibson movie about, Jesus's, crucifixion and how it was kind of anti-Semitic, and there was a whole big divide. And that summer it really was. And George Bush won the election, mainly emphasizing his belief on that it was, cultural appropriation. Noted. We'll get to it. Thank you, Adam. That it was religious, and it was a divide in the country, and that was an interesting year. Now, I really liked the film he did after Fahrenheit 9/11. I really, really, really liked the movie he made, Sicko. That was by far one of the most powerful films. It was about healthcare. But it was so much more than a condemnation of the healthcare system. It was a condemnation of capitalism. And the end in Cuba, where the Cuban firefighters are honoring heroes of 9/11, it was really a really, really powerful film. I loved it. Sicko it's one of the best documentaries. I got chills. I saw a preview of it, right? I actually saw, and I saw it before it was generally released. I remember in Cleveland, I was in Cleveland Heights. They did a preview where you had to fill out a survey after you watched it, and I had chills. I saw it completely on a whim. It was random, and me and an 80-year-old woman who was educating me about Marxism. I took the rapid transit, the RTA, and I met her in downtown, and we went to the movie. And we had just heard about it a couple hours before, and we sat there in the theater, and we had chills. It was just so powerful. Sicko, A+. Capitalism, a love story. Well, I don't know. Capitalism, a love story. It was amazing that it came out. They made a movie critical of capitalism. Amazing. A lot of the film was very, very good, exposing the problems of capitalism. I actually know a number of people that are in that movie. That was what was kind of interesting about it, because a number of people that I had worked with in Detroit, I had worked with in other cities, like people I had actually driven to the Republic window and door makers occupation of their factory. We were outside with protest signs. There's shots of like roommates of mine and stuff in that movie. So that movie, I felt like I was almost like, it was like weird. I was seeing so many people I knew. I was hearing voices of people I knew on the screen. But at the same time, I felt like it didn't lead one to fully socialistic conclusions. And it was kind of vague, like the answer was worker cooperatives or something, and it was a little bit, but it was okay. It was good. It had its good moments. Since then, I mean, I don't know, that latest movie he did, the Fahrenheit 11/9 about Trump. I watched that, and I must say, didn't like it. It seemed like every 15 minutes of the movie should have been a different movie. It was 15 different documentaries. Matthew Jones, Canadian Bacon. I enjoyed Canadian Bacon. It was clever. It was mocking American bigotry against Canadians. It was kind of a wag the dog type movie. It was basically wag the dog, except instead of the war, the fake war was with Canada and some like Midwestern guys go over the border. It was hilarious. I liked Canadian Bacon. Good movie. Yeah, I recommend it. John Goodman and Mike. It's the only movie Michael Moore ever made that was like a regular movie. It was a feature film with fiction, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Thank you, Matthew Jones, for bringing that up. I do, and it was great, and it was kind of mocking the Gulf War and mocking, American, global militarism, military-industrial complex. I liked Canadian Bacon. But yeah, that last one he did, the Fahrenheit 11/9, it was every 15 minutes should have been a different movie. And then on top of that, you felt sick to your stomach afterwards. You didn't, you watch Capitalism: A Love Story, you watch Sicko, you watch even Fahrenheit 9/11, as dark as the film is, you feel good, right? You feel like there is right and wrong in the world. You want to do something. The way that, I don't want to give away the ending if you haven't seen it, but the way Fahrenheit 11/9 ended, after he just threw everything with the kitchen sink at Trump, it's one of those, I'm not a fan of Trump, as people know. I've been especially very critical of him. I did not vote for Trump. There's many things about him I find odious. I'm not sure. I really do think that he's probably better than Hillary Clinton would have been, but is that an argument in his favor? Not really. And he's been an epic disaster, and I'm not a fan of him at all. But 2016, I mean, would he have been better than Hillary Clinton? Doubtful. Or would Hillary Clinton have been better? Doubtful. But at the same time, I must say that that this Trump is Satan, Trump is evil, Trump, we're all gonna die, Nazis, you're coming, we're all gonna be put in camps, and it's stop Trump, or that's a lot of that's coming from the establishment, and and Michael Moore seems to have thrown himself into it, and he made a movie that was designed to appeal to those kind of sentiments, and it just didn't sit well with me. I mean, it just didn't sit well with me. I mean, I sat in the theater, and especially the way it ended. It was 15 different movies packed into one. It wasn't funny. There were some parts of it that were inspiring when it talked about like the teachers' strikes in West Virginia and the organizing the teachers did. That was pretty inspiring. Interviewing some of the Democratic Socialist candidates, people that are running for office on a socialist platform around parts of the USA like West Virginia and Pennsylvania. That was exciting. Some parts of it, though, I didn't really find too inspiring. The parts about the kids organizing their gun walkout, I was just like, yeah, this could be on CNN. Trying to say that Trump is a pedophile because of the way he is with his daughter. And I was just like, come on, this could be CNN. There were parts of the movie I really enjoyed. There were also parts of it that it could be CNN. And overall, it was kind of like Fahrenheit 9/11. It didn't really have a central thesis. He was taking everything but the kitchen sink and throwing it at Donald Trump. And then on top of it, at least Fahrenheit 9/11 was at least critical of the mainstream establishment. This one just seemed to be critical of somebody the establishment is also critical of. So I didn't particularly care for the latest one. But Michael Moore's career is far, far more than we realize. Look into Michael Moore's past. He's not one of these people that gets Instagram famous, right? It's not like he was just some nobody somewhere and he tweeted something sometime and he's famous. Not at all. Michael Moore, there's a long history there, right? Whether, it was Roger and Me, great movie about, the auto companies and deindustrializations. Thank you. Wow, Jenny Lynn has sent me a super chat on behalf of somebody else who couldn't do it. That is super chat solidarity. That is kindness. That is sweet. Thank you, Jenny Lynn. Thank you, the person who couldn't do it. I appreciate it. Hey, folks, we're just making a great show. It's great. But, Roger and Me was a great, great film. I thought it was great. And it was kind of an underground hit. It was a very low-budget movie, and it ends with blatant criticism of capitalism from the mouth of a GM executive, right? At the end, he's interviewing a GM executive, and he says, "I think you're implying that somehow, we're obligated to, guarantee employment to all workers, and that's just not realistic under our free market system." That's how the film ends. So he's basically got an admission that capitalism is bad. I thought that was a great way. Michael Moore had a radio show in Flint, Michigan, and he would have members of the Communist Party, members of the Workers' World Party on the show to discuss the Soviet Union, to discuss global issues. That was a gutsy thing to do, but he would do it, right? He had, I believe, Jerry Goldberg, who's an longtime lawyer and organizer for the Workers' World Party, and I guess now he's with one of the breakaways, the Communist Workers League. But they used to have him on the show. I think that's a great thing to do. He was editor of The Nation magazine, the Nation, longtime liberal leftist kind of magazine, and he got fired. And why did Michael Moore get fired from The Nation? Because they wanted him to write articles bashing the Sandinistas, the Nicaraguan revolutionary government in the 80s. And he refused. That's certainly courageous. He said, I'm not going to print articles that Reagan can use to justify funding the Contras and his crimes. Wow. That was a pretty darn heroic stand, right? To make clear that he wasn't going to repeat deceptions and propaganda to be used to justify, a war against Nicaragua. That was a bold stand, and it cost him his job, for goodness sakes. That's pretty good, Michael Moore is one of these people. It's kind of all over the place, his whole obsession with wanting Oprah to run for president. That was weird. What's that about? He really, I don't know why he did this, and he wrote a book called Dude, Where's My Country? And in that book, he took a stab at Mumia Abu-Jamal, and that was completely unnecessary, and he didn't back it up with anything. He said Mumia Abu-Jamal is probably guilty. Well, I don't think Mumia Abu-Jamal is guilty. I think that the forensic evidence shows the bullets didn't come from his gun. The eyewitnesses say he didn't kill the officer, and the ones who did have admitted that they were tampered with. I don't think Mumia Abu-Jamal is guilty. And for you to just say that in a book, in a one-liner, and as somebody who's as famous as Michael Moore is, that's problematic. I don't think he should have done that. So Michael Moore is an interesting guy. He's all over the place. Sometimes, he's closer to where I'm at. Sometimes he's not. And things have gotten so darn weird since Trump in 2016 and everything that's gone on. But Michael Moore is angry. Michael Moore is furious about what's going on, and you should be too. The DNC is caught red-handed. If the WikiLeaks emails haven't exposed them for being what they are, now they're doing it before the whole world. There's no leaks are necessary. Everyone can see exactly what they're doing. They have been caught with the church steeple in their pocket, to use some archaic phraseology. They have been caught with the church steeple in their pocket. They changed the rules for Bloomberg, but they won't change the rules for Tulsi Gabbard. They won't change the rules for Andrew Yang. And they've been accusing Bernie of being a bad sport and not supporting Hillary when he did. And now all of their frontrunners, Biden, all of them are saying they won't support Bernie if he gets the nomination. This is something else. This is really, really something else. But it seems to parallel what happened in the Republican Party in the lead up to the 2016 election. When Donald Trump was running, a lot of the mainstream Republicans said they wouldn't back him. Just saying, folks. Just saying. This is weird. We could get a Bernie Sanders nomination. It could happen. I'm telling you right now, anything can happen in the next few months. But the possibility that coming out of the convention in July, we have a nomination of Bernie Sanders is possible at this point. It could be a lineup of forces that leaves no other possibility. And that means that the work that we are doing on these live broadcasts every weekend is going to become really darn important. Really, really darn important. Because the conversation between now and July, and most likely between now and November, is going to have a lot to do with socialism. Folks, I was on YouTube the other day. A Donald Trump advertisement came up, and it was, "Come and take our poll on socialism." They're already, I mean, it's, during the Obama years, they were calling Obama a socialist. And you think we are going to be talking socialism and communism ad nauseum for the next few months. And most of the voices, as you all know, most of the voices who discuss it should not be discussing it. The conversation is premised on every socialist government everywhere has always been a big epic failure, or socialism just means free healthcare. And Bernie Sanders, who is on record praising Fidel Castro, on record praising the Sandinistas, on record praising Hugo Chavez, tried to back away from it, but we know 80s, 70s, 80s, he was hanging out with the tankies. Let's be real. And as a result of that, we are going to be having a conversation. We are going to be having a conversation about everything we talk about on these lives. And I am prepared to cringe because I know I've heard these kind of conversations on regular mainstream media. Now, I'm getting a lot of invitations right now, folks. You wouldn't believe the number of people that are reaching out to me. I can't accept all of the invitations I get. I will accept the ones that I can. I cannot accept all of them. But and this is just January. Folks, what we're doing here is going to be in high demand. It's going to be very, very important. And we need to pull out all the stops. We need to get this conversation everywhere. People need to be talking about socialism the way we talk about socialism, not the way trots talk about socialism. Not the way anarcho-communists talk about socialism. We need to make this conversation one that is actually sensible, not the way flag-burning ultra-lefts talk about socialism, but in a way that can actually get people to understand that a socialism with American characteristics would actually make their lives better here in the United States, and that we could have a society in the USA that's not part of the global system of imperialism and monopoly capitalism, but operates on the basis of win-win cooperation with the rest of the world. We could have a prosperous socialist America. We could do it, and we can have a conversation about it. I'm doing my part. I hope you all are doing your part, but we need this conversation that we're having. Every weekend we have these conversations. We need it to blow up bigger and bigger and bigger. Tweet this out, share this, bring your friends, bring your family. Come to New Jersey. Come to New Jersey, April 18th. I can't tell you as much. You are going to be blown away. There are going to be some big name guests there. Not going to say any names yet. That will come soon. There will be some big name guests and speakers. It's going to be quite an event. I was at the beautiful hotel, beautiful room, view of the river, view of the ocean, right next to Lincoln Harbor. It's something special is in the works, folks. Something really, really special. If you, set your calendar, book your flight, book your Greyhound bus, book your megabus, book your Amtrak train, get to Lincoln Harbor, get to Weehawken, New Jersey. You won't regret it. It's going to be something special. When we kick off the Center for Political Innovation, a dynamic think tank, not a political party. No. People are like, Caleb's starting a new party, right? Caleb is starting a new party. He's going to form the Revolutionary Workers Combat Communist Labor League. No, I'm not. Caleb's forming the Communist Party, Marxist, Leninist, Maupinist. No, I'm not. I don't do that kind of thing. I don't. I'm not a political activist. In fact, I don't even endorse any candidates. There are things I like about Bernie. There are things I do not like about Bernie. But I'm not endorsing any candidate, number one. And this is not a new party, right? I work with people. I have a lot of good friends in the Communist Party. They're going to come. I have a lot of good friends that are in the Democratic Socialists of America. They're going to come. I have a lot of good friends that are in certain Maoist ML groups. They're going to come. I've got anarchist friends. They're going to come. I've got social democratic friends. They're going to come. I've got friends that are just anti-imperialist activists. They're not aligned with any of that party stuff, right? They just are into opposing wars and talking about getting beyond capitalism. They're going to come. I know people that are just Bernie Sanders supporters. They're going to come. I know Tulsi people that are going to come. And I want you to be there, folks. If you miss this conference, you'll regret it. I mean, yes, there will be video afterwards, but being there will be something special. You might feel like you're the only person who thinks the way we do. right? And sometimes you can feel that way. I mean, when you go to work, you go to class at your university, and everyone's sitting there going, Assad just gassed his own people and murdered his own people. We got to invade Syria. Oh my God. And somebody else says, well, we all know that Assad gassed his own people and murdered his own people, but maybe invading Syria won't help. But oh my God, everybody knows. And you're sitting there going, that's just not necessarily the truth. There's other versions of events that and you're sitting there and your head wants to just explode. You just want to explode. Or when you're sitting there and they're talking about Venezuela and people are like, oh, the socialist government's starving people. And then somebody in the room says, well, actually, socialism just means, the post office. So don't worry, Venezuela is not real socialism. And you're sitting there going, maybe that's not the whole story. And you're furious and you just can't stand it that it seems like people are having arguments and what you know to be factual, what you know to be true is never allowed to be part of the discourse. And you feel like you're all alone in all of this, but you're not all alone, folks. You are not all alone. And you will find out on April 18th that there are many, many, many people who agree with you. And there are many, many people that are tired of imperialism, that are tired of profits over people, that want to get to a rational society here in the United States. Folks, you will love it. You will love it, and you will regret it if you're not there. April 18th, mark your calendar, be there. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be an exciting one-day mini conference. Big names involved, folks. Not going to say them yet, but it's going to be good. Won't just be me. I'll be there, though. I'll definitely be there. I'll be giving a great presentation, but some good friends of mine are going to be there. Some other folks. You will not regret it. It will be a great day. Mark your calendar, folks. The Center for Political Innovation is moving ahead. A think tank, a nonpartisan think tank dedicated to socialist education. Be there. Please be there. Be there. And if you can't be there, you can always help it happen because these things are not cheap, right? I'm flying people in and it's, any support you can give, donations are helpful as well. We'll have a mechanism that you can donate to help the Center for Political Innovation do its work. And that work is going to be so exciting. Folks, we have our job cut out for us in the next few months, the next 9 months perhaps. Socialism is going to be on everyone's lips. They are going to be talking socialism nonstop across the United States of America. And we need to be part of that conversation because if we're not, it's going to go very, very, very badly. It's going to go very, very, very badly. We need you. We need you to be part of an important conversation. Folks, I was asked about my opinion about cultural appropriation. Well, that's interesting. That's a big question to get into. First of all, I will say that I have an instinctual, I think on some level, I don't know if other people feel this way, instinctually, when we see really blatant, inappropriate cultural appropriation, it just bothers you. For example, I'm from a very small town in Ohio, almost entirely white. There were a few African-American families there, but almost entirely white. And for like 2-3 weeks in my town, all these young white kids decided that the cool thing to do was to pronounce the word 50. Thank you, Arthur Porter, for your great super chat. To pronounce the word 50 with a D. Fiddy, right? Attempting to present in perhaps an African-American accent or vernacular or slang or whatnot. And I heard that and I thought, that's not right. If an African-American had done that, fine. But for white people to go around talking about fiddy, it just wasn't right. It's just not appropriate. And it was like, no one told me this is cultural appropriation. I did not take any race relations course. I didn't study black studies. When a young white person from my town would walk around going, hey, look, there's fiddy, I would just be like, shut up. It was like nails on a chalkboard. It annoyed me. I knew it was wrong, right? Cultural appropriation, blatant cultural appropriation is gross. It's gross. I mean, it just is gross. I mean, when it gets to be so blatant, you kind of want to throw up. I mean, you just on a gut level know it's wrong, and it just doesn't sound right. That's all there is to it. But beyond that, cultural appropriation, I mean, some things are weird. Like, there was a young woman who wore her prom dress. She wore a traditional Chinese dress to the prom, right? And she posted on Facebook that she was doing this. And all these internet folks ganged up on her. How dare you, you young white woman, appropriate Chinese traditional clothing? You're disgusting. You're racist. How dare you? I mean, it was a big thing. It got a lot of international media coverage. How dare you, you disgusting. I mean, it was like blowing up. They were after this young woman, like, for doing this. But then the Chinese Communist Party, via their publications, right, like the Chinese media, took the opposite position. Chinese media praised this young woman for doing that. And they said, this shows how much China is loved around the world. And this young woman, while she was being hated by all these people, most of whom were white, maybe some of them were not white, maybe even a few of them were Chinese, but the Chinese government thought that this woman, who was American, white American in the United States, putting on a traditional Chinese dress was a compliment to Chinese civilization. And the Chinese media and the People's Republic, this woman was praised. And they showed that picture all over Chinese state television. And they said, this shows that Americans have a deep admiration for China. I mean, they thought it was great. And every so often you get a moment where you realize that the way people feel and the way people are told to feel, or the way you've been told that people feel, are different. Right? And every so often that happens, right? That everyone in China, for the most part, I mean, I can't speak, it's a big country, but all the major voices in China thought it was a great thing that she wore that dress. All the Americans who thought they had been told to oppose cultural appropriation and that they were going to be great, fighting, quote-unquote, SJWs, they were wrong. Or maybe they weren't. Who knows, right? I'll never forget. One day, I had the assignment as a reporter to go and interview people in New York City about racially offensive things throughout the city. And so I did. I went around the city and interviewed people. And I went to Washington Square Park. And I interviewed a number of African Americans at Washington Square Park. Are you offended that Washington Square Park is named after a slave owner? No, they weren't. They said no. They said, if it was named after a Confederate, that would bother them. But Washington didn't engage in an armed uprising to preserve slavery. They weren't bothered that it was Washington Square Park. I went to Jefferson Park, which is in a mostly African-American and Caribbean-American neighborhood, in Manhattan. I went there and I interviewed. The park was almost entirely people of color. I barely saw any white people in this park. And every single person I interviewed told me they had no problem with it being named Jefferson Park. We all know about Jefferson, and not only was he a slave owner, but he raped one of his slaves. He has descendants from Sally Hemings. You want to talk about racist and slaveholder and inappropriate? That's Thomas Jefferson. This park, these people said, this is what the park has been called. This is my neighborhood. People need to not be violent. People said, we're worried about jobs. They didn't like Trump. They had hatred for Trump. But I went through that park trying to find somebody, if I could find anyone who was offended by Jefferson Park being named Jefferson Park. I couldn't find it. But then I went to Madison Avenue. And Madison Avenue, named after James Madison. And I spoke to many, many wealthy white liberals who told me that they were deeply offended, deeply, deeply offended that it was named. And I realized that there is a gap. There is a gap. These white liberals knew the party line. They knew what they were supposed to think, and people that are African-American may not agree with them, that things are more complicated, right? Just like these people on the internet thought they were speaking for Chinese people against this horrendous cultural appropriation. China actually was deeply honored that this young white woman wore a Chinese dress to her prom. So it's not that simple. But yes, blatant cultural appropriation. Elvis Presley. Right? I talked about it in a previous live. I can talk about it again. Elvis Presley is a great example of cultural appropriation. The only reason Elvis Presley became wildly famous and wildly rich is because he was white. I mean, he was a white man who could sing black music. Black music, rock and roll, blues was in high demand, but racism would not allow black people to sing it on national television or to play it on the radio. So they found a white guy who could sing that music, and and he himself admitted, and he himself, there was no question about it. That's cultural appropriation, and that's disgusting. And the fact that, that people could maintain this bigotry, people could love African-American music, the music of African-American culture, on the one hand, but on the other hand, be so bigoted they wouldn't even play it, and they had to have a white guy sing it, or else they wouldn't play the music on the radio, they wouldn't book the guy to perform on national TV. That's horrendous. That's horrendous. And that's cultural appropriation. That's not acceptable. Not acceptable. So there you go. The other thing I will say, though, I will add this, is I think that there's matters of degree and there's matters of sensitivity, right? I try to be culturally sensitive, but every so often you make a mistake. You do something that somebody just takes the wrong way. It gets under their skin. They get angry about it. You meant nothing wrong. You weren't trying to hurt them. You just were doing what you naturally do, but you crossed a line. You did something wrong. The thing is, if you can learn to just listen to the other person and say, oh, I didn't think of it that way. Thanks for raising that with me. That can be very helpful. Don't get all defensive. Don't get all, oh, how dare you? I am not racist. How dare you? If you can just, if somebody says, hey, the way you used that turn of phrase, that comment that you made, just listen to them. There's no need, sure, if you're in a public forum, if you're but, if somebody just comes to you and says, hey, I don't feel right about this. This thing that you just did wasn't nice to women, wasn't nice to people of color, somebody might interpret what you just said this way. Just listen to them. Just listen. That's all you can do. Listen to them. A lot of times, people jump to conclusions, right? They assume that this person's saying this is accusing you of being a bad person. They're accusing you of being the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. And you want to just jump in and say, oh, no, how dare... Don't. Let them make their point. Oh, I didn't see it that way. Maybe it's something I should think about. You don't even have to admit guilt. Just listen to them. I've noticed that there are a lot of white Americans who really, really have this defensiveness. They have this narrative in their head that there are these bad people called racists, and they're not one of them. And we all know that it's not that simple. It's not that simple. The way these things play themselves out with bigotry, with assumptions, with biases, it's not a matter of that there are just these bad people out there called racists, and they're not you, and how dare some... it's not that simple. It's not that simple. I don't want to get too much into this. This is the kind of stuff these are the kind of conversations I get tired of. I will be honest. You know what I mean? It's worth talking about. It's important, and I'm glad I was asked, and I hope that my comments here, went over well. I hope people appreciated what I have to say, but this is not what I became a socialist about. I didn't become a socialist to talk about cultural appropriation and whether or not it's appropriate for teenage girls to wear Chinese dresses to proms and they're not Chinese. This is what we spend too much time on the left talking about, okay? You want to talk about the oppression of China. Why don't you talk about the fact that we're waging a trade war? Why don't you talk about the fact that when China was dirt poor and the USA was trying to keep China poor, people starved to death by their millions, but now with socialism, they've become a global superpower. Why don't you talk about that? Why don't you talk about the fact that with socialism, China is pulling itself up by its bootstraps and making huge achievements? Why don't you, I don't want to talk about this, this, what do you call it? This whose feelings were hurt and how do Hollywood movies touch on oppression of people. If you want to talk about that, go right ahead. But I'm sick of those conversations. I really am. That's not what I got into this for. It's important. I need to be sensitive. If I've ever crossed a line and offended somebody, which I know I have, and I've made mistakes, I don't want to offend anybody, and I'll listen to criticism. But come on, folks. I didn't become a leftist in order to go to group therapy. If I wanted to go to group therapy, I would just go to group therapy. Seriously. So many left meetings I would go to and would sit there and we're all going to start and go around and say our preferred gender pronoun, and then we're going to talk about our feelings, and we're going to talk about the moment where we felt the most loved in life. And oh my God, come on, seriously. If I want to go to group therapy, I'll go to group therapy. I'm a leftist because I'm interested in Marxism and socialism and leftism. And I noticed that. And there were many times, many times when I was in left circles, and I realized that what these people believe in and what I believe in is, I believe socialism will make a better life for the people of the United States of America. I believe that the banks, factories, and industries should be organized to serve public good as a not-profit. I believe that we need to end the system of global monopoly capitalism and have an economy based on win-win cooperation where countries trade with each other for mutual benefit and the whole world is raised out of poverty. I believe in science and technology and human progress. There are a lot of people that refer to themselves as left. What they believe in is that America is an evil country founded on racism, sexism, and homophobia, and that Americans should be ashamed of themselves, and that we all need to check our privilege, and that having any nice clothes, wearing a suit means you're wearing the suit of the empire, and we got to burn shit down and tear shit down and fuck that and and burn, yeah, rebellion, tear shit up, I don't know, that's not me. It's never been me. I mean, maybe there were parts of that I might have agreed with at one point in my life, but that, self-destruction, revolution for the hell of it, contempt for the society that you live in, a desire to tear it down, that's not me. It's not me, and that kind of thing is not helpful, in my view. In my personal view, that stuff is not helpful. Is racism, sexism, homophobia, these are things that exist, folks. I'm not saying people shouldn't oppose such things. I'm not saying that people shouldn't talk about such things, but the goal should be to make a better life for the overwhelming majority of the people of the country and to use socialism to do it, right? It's about making your life better. It's about building a better society. It's about building solidarity and opposing racism. That's what it's about, right? It is about bringing people together and organizing to build a whole new society where growth is unrestrained by greed, right? There is no limit to growth. There's only a limit to profits. There is no limit to growth. There's only a limit to profits. The human race can continue to move ahead. Human history can continue to move forward. The only thing that is stopping us is the greed of a small group of billionaires and bankers who have organized the world economy in order to enrich themselves. We need a new economy organized to serve public good and to build a better life. We need an economy organized to serve the people. The means of production, the centers of economic power, the banks, factories, and industries must be organized to serve society, must be organized to serve public good and not profits. That's socialism, right? The countries that have been kept poor by the system of global monopoly capitalism should be allowed to break free, and we ourselves, the United States, should also break free from that system and organize a society where the people come first. That is socialism. That is the message of socialism. That is Marxism, right? Striving for a world with so much material abundance, with so much equality, where the need for any coercion fades away, the need for any state fades away, the need for any real authority fades away, and people can just kind of take what they need and do what they want to do, from each according to his own ability, from each according to his needs. That is the ultimate goal of the class struggle, and it is based on material abundance, right? The system of primitive communalism, primitive tribalism. That's the majority of human history. We were hunter-gatherers in the woods, hunting and gathering. Well, that system was based on a certain level of material abundance, a very, very low level, a very, 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 scarce, a system of scarcity. There was a huge amount of scarcity, and humans hunted and gathered. And it got to the point that we could move to a higher mode of production where we grew crops, domesticated animals, and that was a different mode of production. And that mode of production was known as slavery because you had landowners and people who worked the land, and some people owned other people. And the empires of Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome were slave empires based on that system of people owning other people, and domestication of animals, and the selling of products, and that was the beginning. Out of slavery, you got feudalism, which was more efficient, in which the serf, the landowner owns the land, but he does not own the people who live on it. The people who live on it work the land and pay a tax to the landlord, and then they get to keep whatever is left over, right? It's subsistence farming, but there's a landowner, who has the obligation to provide the land, protect the people on the land from being conquered by somebody else, and in exchange, he gets a tax, right? The feudalism, the serfs, the feudal commons. Out of that, we eventually get the rise of the mercantile classes who are doing the trading, giving birth to capitalism, a higher system where you have factories, factory production, and, there are factory owners and factory workers. That's capitalism, industrial capitalism. And the idea is that eventually the factories won't be organized just to serve public good, or the factories won't be organized just to make profits for owners, but we'll have factories and banks and centers of economic power and natural resources organized to serve the people. And that's socialism. And the hope is that with socialism, we can reach such a state of material abundance that we can get to a state of being where there's so much, and technology has advanced so much, and prosperity exists to so much of a degree that the wage system fades away, that people just kind of work because they feel like working, and people get what they want because they need it, because we're at such a stage of human abundance where there's so much abundance that something like a 1-hour work week, a 15-minute work week is necessary. We're talking about some kind of high-tech future that's thousands of years in the future. That's the ultimate vision of a stateless, classless world of communism based on vast material abundance, right? This is the Marxist narrative of human history, from hunter-gatherer civilization to slavery to feudalism to capitalism to socialism and ultimately to communism. That is the Marxist understanding of how history works, and it's based each time on a higher mode of production. A mode of production that is more efficient than the previous one, that creates a higher level of material abundance, right? In hunter-gatherer civilization, there was very little human rights. There was no human rights to speak of. People were part of a tribe, and if they didn't go along with the tribe, if they were going to do their own thing, they killed them or they abandoned them in the woods, right? People didn't even have an individual sense of identity in a hunter-gatherer civilization. Their entire existence was tied in with the tribe. Human beings at the time of hunter-gatherer civilization were functioning almost like beehives, right? There was no individualism. People wonder if people even had names during that time. I kid you not, right? Slavery, all of a sudden you have landlords who own land, and we're keeping track. We have families, we're keeping track of, so there's a new level of individualism, a new level of, we have, marriage and the institution of, it's a new level of things, right? Feudalism, all of a sudden we don't have people owning other people. Instead, we have serfs, and serfs, they have property of their own, right? They can keep what's left over after they pay their tax. Capitalism, you have the rights of man and individual liberty and freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and all these concepts that no one had ever talked about, right? I mean, this is right, and that the idea is that with socialism there'll be an even higher level of freedom, This is all understanding the material basis of all of this. This is what's missing from a lot of the analysis you'll get. Some of these ultra-lefts and Maoists and anarchists and stuff don't even understand this is all about economics. They seem to think this is about morality, that socialism is people being more moral than under capitalism or something. I mean, they don't understand there's an economic basis to all of this, right? And that technically, and this is where it gets complicated, but socialism in the classic Marxist narrative comes after capitalism. And many of the countries around the world that have adopted a socialist system of economics were never fully capitalist. They were forced to move towards socialism in order to break out of capitalism, right? Imperialism was keeping them in a semi-feudal state. They broke out of that semi-feudal state and established socialism. But their level of economic prosperity still had not reached the capitalist West. They were ahead of maybe capitalist countries around the third world. They're still, Cuba today, right? It's nowhere near the United States in terms of development. It's got a pretty good life expectancy. David Fox wants me to talk about base and superstructure, and I'll talk about that. Sure, I mean, Cuba has done tremendous things, and industrialized, raised its people out of poverty. I mean, compare them to anyone else in the Caribbean, compared to the Haitians, compared to people in the Dominican Republic, compared to people in Mexico and Guatemala, Cuba's doing pretty well. But, Cuba is not the classic Marxist narrative. It's not a society that became fully capitalist like the United States, and then from that American Western capitalism moved to an even higher state. That's not what happened, right? That things don't work out that way. Things didn't function in a linear way, right? Lenin wrote his very important book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, showing that around the developing world, imperialism was keeping countries poor and keeping them from developing and utilizing them as captive markets to dump excess goods on, right? And holding back economic development. And that countries in the developing world would have socialism as a way to break out of that. They wouldn't have full capitalism, but they would move towards socialism as a way to break out of imperialism. And revolutionary energy wasn't going to be in the West, according to Lenin, according to Mao, according to Stalin. The revolutionary energy was going to be in the East, and it would be the countries that had been held captive by Western capitalism that would move toward socialism, right? And that in the West, you would have the development of the aristocracy of labor, which is a faction, a section of the working class that saw its living standards go up and had the loyalty to imperialism, thought it was better than other workers, and did not believe in solidarity, and would become kind of bought off, right? This is all things that developed, right? That socialism came from the developing world, not from the first world. And that's why nobody is an orthodox Marxist. No one, someone was arguing with me and saying to me, Caleb, because you have spiritual beliefs, you cannot be a Marxist. I said, I can be a Marxist. I can just disagree with Marx on many points. Was Lenin a Marxist? I would say so, but he clearly disagreed with Marx on the nature of the developing world, on the nature of the capitalist West, on the nature of nationalism and the national question. That Marxism is not, it's not religion. It's not a doctrine. It's not a set of things. One can be spiritual and Marxist. One can be anti-imperialist and anti-colonial and be Marxist, right? That it's not about accepting everything blindly that was said. Now, folks want me to talk about base and superstructure. Well, that concept, the way I understand it, is that when the economy functions in a capitalist way, what will come out of that is a society and a culture and a media and academic institutions that promote ideas that correspond with that economic base. The superstructure will correspond with the base, right? That in capitalism, you'll notice that many things that go on mimic the economic base. We have a market capitalist economy, right? And what is it when someone's dating somebody else? What do they say? They say, I'm up on the market. That's pretty disgusting, right? I mean, it's not prostitution. Dating shouldn't be prostitution. That's how people see it, right? That a lot of things in life become like business transactions because we live in a market, profit-oriented society, right? And you turn on the TV, it promotes capitalist ideology, right? You go to the university, you're going to learn that capitalism is the greatest system, that communism is an evil thing that has never worked, and you have to be stupid to believe in it. You're going to learn that socialism, well, maybe there should be a bigger welfare state, but actual Marxism is evil, and except when maybe you'll have a critique of patriarchy or something, but any actual like socialist Marxism is evil. This is the base and the superstructure aligning. That happens. Right? That the economic base will manifest itself in the superstructure. That's all that concept means. And Maoists quote it. And then people, and this is the problem. I don't use that terminology a lot because there are a lot of people who use that concept, which is correct. That's true. Universities in capitalist society reflect capitalist values. Universities in socialist societies, in theory, should reflect socialist values. Right? The TV and the art produced in capitalist society reflects capitalist values. The TV and the art produced in socialist societies, in theory, should reflect socialist values. But it's not that simple, right? A lot of times, socialist countries existing in a capitalist world have ideas of capitalism reflected in their art and culture. And how could they not do that, right? I mean, you know, furthermore, a lot of times in the West, you'll have people with socialist and Marxist ideas who will make movies or concepts, I mean, that happens too. So, it's not 100%, right? Because the USA is socialist, because the USA is capitalist, doesn't mean that I can't be on here talking socialism, right? I'm part of the superstructure, but what I'm telling you contradicts the economic base, right? There could be a universe, and a lot of American movies are shown in China, and they don't allow things that are blatantly anti-communist. They don't allow things that are blatantly promoting anti-materialism. But at the same time, I mean, to be fair, there are a lot of capitalist ideas floating around China. There are a lot of capitalist ideas floating around Cuba that it doesn't perfectly line up. And that there is a certain school of thought. Trust me, folks, at one point in my life, I really, 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 really wanted to believe, because it was in my interest to believe, that the Soviet Union had restored capitalism in 1956. I was in one of these ultra-left groups. I wasn't even in it. I was kind of around it. And they had the line that in 1956, the Soviet Union became capitalist. It was socialist in words, but capitalist in deeds. It was a social imperialist country. And I tried to believe that, and I would read their arguments for it, and it was all based in superstructure. In China, the revolutionary country, they have operas about, women becoming heroic fighters. In the Soviet Union, they show ballets about princes and queens. That can't be socialism. Yes, it can. I mean, it was all based in superstructure. Some Soviet professor somewhere wrote a paper that was against communism, and so therefore the base and superstructure. I mean, it's childish, right? And that it was all subjective. The Soviet Union became capitalist in 1991, right? It did. I mean, it became capitalist in 1991, right? It did. But 1956, there were some political shifts, but the economic base didn't change, right? And that you cannot use things like art and culture to disprove the nature of an economic base. And that's where these people have a problem. And base and superstructure is the basis of a lot of these arguments. People say, well, Cuba's not really socialist because it sold sugar to the Soviet Union. Cuba's not really socialist because it has a market sector. I heard that in Cuba, men use inappropriate language about women sometimes. So this is, right? You take a concept that's true, that the economic base and the superstructure often reflect each other. That's true. You take that concept and you expand it out to mean things that it doesn't actually mean. And that's classic. I mean, I've criticized third worldism. They take that concept that's true about aristocracy of labor and they blow it up into something that it's not, right? And you see a lot of that, right? You see a lot of that. That's a really common thing to do, is people take things that are true, correct, true Marxist concepts, and blow them way out of proportion and use them to kind of cover up other things. And that's how these things exist, right? It's almost like the Freudian concept of perversion. Well, I don't want to get into that, but it's like, there are aspects of one's personality that we all have, but when something goes wrong, according to Freudian psychology, right? Well, we all can be a little bit sadistic. We all can be a little bit homosexual. I'm not a Freudian, but this is what Freud thought, right? Is that growing up, we all have different feelings and all of that. But if something goes wrong, something that's little, that's just part of everyone's personality, everyone has a little bit of it, all just blows up into, that's the Freudian concept of perversion. And it's kind of, I don't think that clearly is not the answer of what defines human sexuality, but I think it is a good way of explaining a lot of these ultra-left groups, is they take a true concept and they blow it up into something that it's not, right? And it is similar to what Sigmund Freud theorized about sexuality. I don't agree with Sigmund Freud about sexuality. Let me be absolutely clear on that. I'm sure there's somebody sitting there going, aha, Caleb admitted that he believes in Freud's homophobic theory that, well, no, I don't. I'm just telling you, that's a Freudian thing. And I think it doesn't apply to sexuality, but it is true. People that have a tendency that's natural. People have all kinds of feelings. Maybe, people want to be clean, right? People want to be clean. Nothing wrong with wanting to be clean. In fact, you should want to be clean. It's important to shower and brush your teeth and all that stuff. But there are people who take that fear of germs, wanting to be clean, and blow it up, right? You know about germ phobes. You know about OCD, right? That's a thing. Mental illness often is taking a good aspect of the human character, like keeping clean, and blowing it up into crazy germ phobia and showering all day, right? That's OCD. That's mental illness, right? Talk about it. I mean, paranoia, right? Should you be on guard and not want other people to betray you and not want to be stabbed in the back and you know, I mean, should you do that? Sure. But if you blow it up to a point where you can't trust anyone, you're always looking over your shoulder, there you go. That's a mental illness. That's how these things work, is that deviations are often natural good things that are blown up in way out of proportion, right? And you talk about that. And and that happens, you know, I mean, you can go down the line. You know, people used to, I mean, when I was growing up, they even taught us in church that that's what a cult was. That a cult is when they take one little part of the Christian religion and blow it up into a whole thing. I mean, that's a whole thing, right? But then here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's in the eye of the beholder. Who's to say, right? I mean, who am I, Caleb Maupin, to say that this person's fear of germs is too blown up? Maybe this person who's washing themselves 24 hours, you know, it's in the eye of the beholder. It's deviation from the norm. This person's fear of germs is way bigger than everyone else's. It's impeding their ability to live their life. We call it mental illness, right? But in politics or in religion, right? I mean, I think personally that these people that are third worldists are taking the concept of labor aristocracy, which is true, blowing it out of proportion and making and pushing it over all other things, right? I think that these people that think the Soviet Union became capitalist in 1956, hardline ultra-Maoists, are taking a concept which is true, base and superstructure, and blowing it way out of proportion and making it into things it's not. But that's how these things work. It's in the eye of the beholder. The Gang of Four in China absolutely did that. They took base and superstructure, and that's part of the Cultural Revolution. That's why they went around breaking signs, and they outlawed. They had the 5 model works. There were only 5 plays that were allowed in China. There were only 5 plays that were allowed during the Cultural Revolution because they wanted to make sure that the base and the superstructure lined up. The belief was that in the Soviet Union, the plays didn't reflect the communist line, and so capitalism had been restored. That's how the Gang of Four saw it. I think the Gang of Four were ultra-leftists and wrong. But the Gang of Four certainly didn't think that. They had a lot of people in China who agreed with them. So it's complicated. These things are complicated. But yes, the struggle is to try not to pick one tree out of the forest and ignore the rest of the forest, right? If you know, they say don't miss the forest for the trees, but in particular, don't pick one tree and make that and don't see the rest of the forest, right? That's my concern. Wow, how did we get on to that? What a wild night this is. Folks, I'm having a great time. I hope you are. We talked about Bernie Sanders. We talked about Michael Moore. We talked about cultural appropriation. We talked about base and superstructure. What in the world are we going to talk about next? Folks, I am waiting. I'm having a great time. I am having a great time. You should make Stephen Bunnell stop playing baseball league. Does he play baseball? I haven't been following him. You know, but I'm getting a lot of requests, folks. People want to debate me left and right. I mean, you wouldn't believe the amount of requests I'm getting right now, and it's only going to escalate, folks. We are on the verge of doing something really, 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 really exciting. Shout out to you, Ramiro, out there in LA. You're doing great work out there. Have you ever read Carl Schmitt? He was that Nazi legal theoretician, I believe. I think I glanced through a book of his writings one time. I'm not into legal stuff. I know he was the big Nazi theoretician of law. You know, it's important to know what people on the far right think. I learned the most about Nazism by reading the biography of Hjalmar Schacht, Hitler's banker. That was very educational for me. I learned about the economic base of Nazism, right? It was really, really important. And from that book, I learned that Schachtian, let's talk about this, right? So economics, right? And there was a request. I think shout out to Nick had asked that I talk about Keynesianism. So, folks, we know what Marxism is. We've been talking Marxism on here nonstop about the need for a socialist society. But what is Keynesianism? What is Keynesianism? So, John Maynard Keynes, Thank you, Arthur. And yes, Arthur, I'll just answer that right now before we get into Keynesianism. Yes, when I was in school, when I was a kid, I studied karate, and that was cool. Yeah, glad I did it. I mean, it was just kind of, I mean, it was like a thing that you did when you were in elementary school. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I never really got too into it, but I did it, sure. All right, so Keynesianism. John Maynard Keynes. John Maynard Keynes was an economist. He was a British economist, and he was around during the Great Depression. And he saw that what they call classical economics or liberal economics wasn't working out too well. Right? There was a problem that he called underconsumption. Right? He argued that Marx was wrong. Marx's theory of overproduction was wrong. But during certain time periods, you have what you call underconsumption. And underconsumption is when people aren't buying the goods, right? The store is full of products, but people can't afford to buy it. You have underconsumption. And I appreciate that. I try to do as many as I can. Thank you, E.E. Camp. I will do more lives. So you have a problem of underconsumption. That's what John Maynard Keynes said. He said the Marxist theory that it's overproduction and the workers must control the means of production, we can just throw that out. But John Maynard Keynes said there is this problem of underconsumption. So the way you solve it is you spend money. The government must spend money. And John Maynard Keynes, he very famously said, only a madman or an economist would think that the most despicable men, for the most despicable of reasons, would work in the interests of all, and that you need the state to control the economy to some degree or other because capitalists are despicable men who just want to make lots of money. Right? And he was a critic of classical economics, right? Adam Smith, greed is good, profits in command, people voting with their dollars, the market resolves everything. That's classical economics, right? Neoliberalism is like an amped up version of that came out in the 70s, but that's classical economics. That's just straight up supply and demand, invisible hand, right? Competition creates the best product. This is classic free market stuff. We've learned this all. That's classical economics. John Maynard Keynes, during the Great Depression in the 30s, saw that this was not working. He also hated communism. He was not a Marxist. So John Maynard Keynes said you have to have the government spend money. A classic expression of John Maynard Keynes' economic theory was he said you hire a worker to go and dig a hole. And you pay him a wage to go and dig the hole. You then hire some other workers to go and fill that hole in. And some would say that's a waste of money, but that man who dug that hole, he got a wage, he then spends money, buys things with that wage, and that solves and resolves the crisis of underconsumption. That's Keynesian economics. The government must spend money in times of economic crisis in order to get the economy going again. And the bailout. What was the bailout? Right? TARP, right? During the financial crisis, Obama, he spent government money. He bailed out the banks. They paid it back, in theory. That was a bailout. Keynesian, right? Another great example, probably a great example, because one of the problems with the bank bailout, the reason it didn't ultimately solve the problem, right? You remember the economy was still bad right after that because, you bailed out the people who already have lots of money, the banks, right? And they still weren't lending any money, right? And I remember there was congressional hearings, and they're yelling at the bankers, we bailed you out, and you're not lending any money. Why are they not lending money? Because they weren't going to make a profit from lending the money. They weren't going to make a profit from lending the money, right? Because no one had any money. So why would they lend people money if they're not going to get it paid back, right? Banks lend money in order to get paid back and make interest, right? And so they bailed out the banks, and then Congress was mad at the banks. How dare you not spend money? Well, why wouldn't they spend any? Why would they lend money to people who can't pay it back? So that was a weird moment. But a more Keynesian kind of thing that Obama did was cash for clunkers. You remember cash for clunkers? That was, the government bought cars from people, old beat up cars, and bought them, and gave people money for it. And then people went and bought new cars, right? And so there was not a problem of overproduction in the car industry, right? People couldn't afford to buy cars. They weren't buying cars. So Obama started the cash for clunkers program, Americans with beat up cars sold them, got the money, and bought new cars. And it was somewhat successful. It helped the auto industry, get the auto industry going after it got bailed out. It was a Keynesian idea. Keynesian economics basically says that the way you get an economy going is the government spends money. And it doesn't really say what the government should spend the money on. It just says when things are bad, have the government spend lots of money. And this is what gets left out. Many people don't realize this, but Nazi Germany was a kind of Keynesian economics, but it was a special kind of Keynesian economics. It wasn't simply the government spending money. It was the government spending money to do certain things, right? Keynesianism can create welfare states, right? Giving people free health care is Keynesian. Giving people government-guaranteed jobs, that's Keynesian, right? The Works Progress Administration, where Roosevelt hired all kinds of people to build bridges and highways and all kinds of stuff during the Great Depression, that was Keynesian. But Nazi economics is a knockoff of Keynesianism. It's different than Keynesian economics. Nazi economics, Schachtian economics, the economist of the Nazis, of the Third Reich, Hjalmar Schacht, Hitler's banker. He believed in this Keynesian principle, the government must spend money when things are going badly, but he believed in it in a specific way. Hjalmar Schacht was the creator of the first military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex. Germany had signed the Versailles Treaty, and under the Versailles Treaty, it was not allowed to have a military. Well, Hitler ripped up the Versailles Treaty and created a German military. And so all kinds of German corporations, like Volkswagen, Krupp, Tyson, all kinds of people were put to work, and lots of jobs were created making guns, bombs, and tanks. And the German government spent lots of money, and it taxed people, and it spent lots of money. And the German state created what was really the first military-industrial complex. What else did the Nazi state do? The Nazi state also had the first prison-industrial complex, right? What did Hitler do as soon as he took power? He, Reichstag fire, rounded up all the Communist Party leaders, put them in concentration camps, rounded up all the Social Democratic leaders, put them in concentration camps, rounded up all the trade union activists, put them in concentration camps. And that was for the first couple years, all the left in Germany, all the leaders of the left were in labor camps. And they did forced labor, right? The peat bog soldiers. There's a famous song from these communist political prisoners, the peat bog soldiers. And they had to work in a peat bog, and they were treated awful. I mean, they were doing miserable, hard labor in these bogs, getting peat, like peat moss, which is used in industry, right? And but when you did that, first of all, there was mass unemployment in Germany. Well, if you take thousands and thousands of people and put them in concentration camps, they're not looking for jobs. They're not competing with the other people for jobs. Plus, you get lots of people who get new jobs as concentration camp guards. Plus, you get lots of people who make money building those big camps and maintaining them, right? And you had a prison industrial complex. And they also built the Autobahns. That was another big thing. Schacht came up with the idea they needed to have highways across Germany. So Hjalmar Schacht, he built the Autobahns. And Nazi Germany was Keynesian in its economic policies. Barely any nationalizations. There were a few nationalizations, but mostly they didn't nationalize stuff. It wasn't National Socialism. The socialism part of National Socialism, it was kind of meaningless. And there was a big fight in the Nazi Party about what National Socialism actually meant, where Gregor Strasser and some of the weird, Strasser, they were arguing that the Nazi state should be more quote unquote socialistic. And, Hitler didn't agree with that. And they purged, and then on the night of the long knives, they executed all the ones who advocated more economic, nationalist stuff. They killed them all. And the Nazi state, the socialism part of National Socialism meant that all business should be loyal to the nation. That's basically all it meant, right? It meant that, businesses must be loyal to the homeland. It had no meaning. No meaning whatsoever. It was, and even before that, the Strasser people, they were anti-Semitic and hateful, and they hated communists, and it was never a left group, but they had some interesting, weird economic theories about like craftsmen and stuff like that, and whatever. That was all done. So the Nazi state, though, comes to power in 1933. By 1935, it had created an economic boom. And how did they do it? Well, they put a huge chunk of the population in prison camps. They put a huge chunk of the population in military uniforms. They started spending money like crazy on military production. And on top of that, they built these Autobahns. And they ripped up the Versailles Treaty and stopped paying back reparations to the Western countries. Those were big, dramatic economic moves, and they created a huge amount of economic growth. And it was Keynesian, right? It was government spending money in order to abet a crisis, and it was successful. But you have to remember, what were they doing in order to do that? They were taking people out of the workforce. That was, the prison system, the concentration camp system, was about eliminating people from the labor market. Not employing people, but eliminating from the labor market. And it was about building mechanisms for destruction. Not building schools, not building hospitals. I'm sure they did a little bit of that, but it was mainly about building mechanisms for war and destruction, imprisoning people, creating slave labor. The Nazi state used slave prison labor. That was a big part of it, slave prison labor, right? To build those Volkswagen, Volkswagen factories had concentration camp prisoners working at them. The Nazi state, it was about, you take a section of the working class and you beat them down and you force them to do slave labor and you just deprive them of rights and you start impoverishing big sections of your society, and you can create an economic boom. That's Schachtian economics. It's different than Keynes. It's very different than Keynes. Very, very different than Keynes. Right? It's a specific kind of economics that's focused primarily on reducing the population level and reducing to poverty certain sections of your country. What more is the Nazi state was actively trying to reduce its population. Right? People don't realize this, but one of the big things the Nazis did was try to reduce their own population. All right? And they actively were trying to reduce their population. They passed laws saying that if anyone had any hereditary problem, they could not reproduce. Right? They, and it even applied to like political dissidents and stuff. They mass sterilizations. They started exterminating disabled people. They had this poster. They talked about useless eaters. The disabled people, they called them useless eaters, and were exterminating them. The Nazi state was actively reducing its population in order to stimulate the economy, right? Complete opposite of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was drastically trying to increase its population. They had a medal called Mother of the Soviet Union. And any woman who bore more than 10 children got this medal. And she was a mother of the Soviet Union. And they pushed that, right? And the Soviet government was constantly trying to expand its population because the more people they had, the more labor those people would do, and the greater the surplus would be, and the more the economy would expand. Nazi Germany and Schachtian economics was about impoverishing people, enslaving people, building mechanisms of death with the military, and reducing the population, exterminating useless eaters, and eventually building concentration camp. Towards the end of the 1930s, they start rounding up Jews and homosexuals, and we all know what happened at Auschwitz and all of that, right? So the Nazi state, despite the fact that it had some weird pseudo, quote unquote, they called themselves progressive in various instances, they were about reducing the population, militarizing destruction, and trying to resolve an economic crisis with mass destruction. That was essentially the basis of Nazi economics. It was a specific kind of Keynesianism, a Keynesianism that was inherently destructive and backward-looking, right? Rooseveltian Keynesian was very different. Roosevelt was constantly trying to build up the United States, build infrastructure, build new universities. Read the essays by Vannevar Bush, for example. Right? The U.S. Keynesianism of the Roosevelt era, the Works Progress Administration, was based on constantly trying to expand the population, constantly trying to build up and make people wealthier, and it was a very different kind of Keynesianism. Roosevelt was not a socialist, and we never became a socialist society. There was an alliance between the Roosevelt coalition and the left, but overall, the Roosevelt Keynesianism was forward-thinking, wanted to expand the population, wanted to build up the country. Very different, very, very different mindset. Whereas Shaktian Nazi economics is it's a death economy. That's basically what Shaktian economics is. Shaktian Keynesianism, Nazi economics is death economy. You can call it the death economy. Death economy. It is about we're trying to reboot the economy by building prisons, by building war devices and militarizing, and by exterminating people and reducing the population. It's death economy. That is Nazi economics. Death economy. It's cold, calculated death economy. And after the Second World War, we started adopting death economy mechanisms in the United States. Let's be real. Right? The military-industrial complex. World War II. After the Second World War, as the war was ending, Roosevelt dies. After the war is over, Truman gets in there. Vast, huge military spending. Huge selling of arms around the world. We build up our military-industrial complex. They made it blatant. Blatant, folks. Not only did we do the military-industrial complex, which was straight out of Schacht, straight out of Nazi. On top of that, what did Truman do? He built the interstate highway system for the same reason that the Nazis built the Autobahns. They built the interstate highway system because they said it was to protect from a foreign invasion. They needed a highway system to connect the country in case there was an invasion. And before that, what did we have before we had the interstate highway system? What did we have? Trains. We had the railroads. Well, all the railroads were bought up by the big oil companies, dismantled, and to replace trains, which are much more efficient, much less dangerous in terms of car accidents. If you've ever had a relative or someone you know die in a car accident, you should be furious because prior to the Second World War, prior to the 1950s, we had a huge train railroad system in the United States. You go to Europe, go to Britain, they have a train system. Go to France, they have a train system. We used to have one of those in the USA. We ripped it up. The oil companies bought up the railways, and on top of that, the government, the federal government, just like the Nazis, built the Autobahns. At the time, we were having a prison-industrial complex, or a military-industrial complex. At the same time we were doing that, we built this huge interstate highway system. So now we have car culture and gas guzzlers and all of that. Truman started us down the road to a military-industrial complex. Next, right, we remember that Dwight Eisenhower, the Republican, actually warned the public about, as he's leaving office, he warned the public about the dangers of the military-industrial complex. Because he, as a Republican, as a conservative, as a military guy himself, was alarmed about how essential, when the facts were laid before him, how essential military spending was to the U.S. economy. It scared him. A Republican, a conservative, a military guy, Dwight Eisenhower, was scared. Ike, right? We like Ike. He saw from the White House how much the U.S. economy was not a free market economy. It was a Keynesian economy based on government spending. If the government stopped spending money, the economy would collapse in a week, right? Even in the 50s when it was a booming economy, he realized the only thing that kept the U.S. economy rolling on was military spending. The USA was a military-industrial complex. Military Keynesianism. Military Keynesianism. That was the basis of the U.S. economy. Military Keynesianism, military spending, profits from war, military production. Right? And still today, the USA is overwhelmingly, by a huge amount, the biggest spender on the military and the biggest exporter of military hardware and weapons. It's very hard. If you go to a hardware store, go to Home Depot, the store of Bernie Marcus. Don't go there. I mean, maybe you have to go there, but I'm not advocating anyone shop there. No product placement here. Diet beverage, right? But if you go to Home Depot, try to find any product there that isn't somehow tied in with military production, right? Seriously, General Electric, right? Raytheon, Boeing, right? I mean, the U.S. economy, since the 50s, has been a Keynesian, Shaktian, military-based economy. But then it gets even better. Not better, it actually gets worse. So we had huge amounts of economic growth in the 50s, huge amounts of economic growth in the 60s. In the late 70s, we had the first major economic downturn since the end of the Second World War. 78, Carter's in there, right? First major, huge economic downturn since the end of the Second World War. Around that time, drug use had become far more popular. In the 1960s, drug use was considered very hip and cool. The Beatles were, encouraging people to use drugs, and drugs were hip and cool, and hallucinogens and marijuana, and drug use was everywhere. So in the late 70s, you saw the very beginning of a prison industrial complex, where all of a sudden the rate of incarceration in the United States went through the roof. Right? The Rockefeller drug laws, just say no. Ronald Reagan was all about just say no. He had everyone terrified. Your kids are going to go to a party and smoke some weed sometime and then become, quivering heroin junkies for the rest of their life. So therefore, we have got to lock up all the drug users and war on drugs, and we got to send weapons to Central America to fight the communists because they're all drug users somehow, even though we're giving money to the drug dealers, but we don't talk about that. And oh my goodness, folks, it was, drugs are coming. Drugs are going to come get you. Drug use is awful. I do not endorse drug use. And the other view that drugs are cool and okay, I'm not with that either. But regardless, the lock 'em up movement, right? People don't stop being addicts when you put them in prison, right? People in prison, with a bunch of other addicts, with a bunch of other criminals and gang. I mean, right? The what do you call it? The prison industrial complex, mass incarceration, locking people up in huge numbers, war on drugs, tough on crime, Willie Horton ad, right? Remember the Willie Horton ad, right? That was the 80s. That was the 80s, and what was it? It was a huge stimulus to the economy. Prison industrial complex. And what on top of that, we had private companies that started using prison labor. Private companies, folks, they make U.S. military hardware in federal prisons. Look it up. There are, at this very moment, even though it's Saturday night, I can guarantee you in some federal prison somewhere, there are prisoners that are making military hardware. Right? They are not getting paid anything near. They are getting paid far below the civilian minimum wage. Right? Prisoners don't have to get paid the minimum wage. And they're in prison, working round the clock, making military hardware for military contracting companies. Read about it. Airplane parts and uniform parts, all kinds of military products get made by federal prisoners as cheap labor. And private companies that are not even tied in with the military, just regular private companies. They have prisoners taking people's calls. Prisoners as call center workers. They have prisoners sewing together Victoria's Secret, I heard, right? Prison labor. It's a big thing. Instead of hiring law-abiding citizens outside of the jail who are, required to get paid a minimum wage, oh, no. Oh, no. We got a prisoner who can do it for 2 cents an hour, $1 an hour, whatever you want to call it. Prison labor. Prisons for profit. the government is spending money, right? You got private prisons now, where you have a private company that gets paid for the number of people that get locked up. GEO Group, right? Wells Fargo. Folks, right? This is just the same thing that Hallomer Schacht did in Nazi Germany with the concentration camp system, a prison industrial complex. What the Nazi economist Hallomer Schacht did with the military industrial complex and the prison industrial complex, that is what the USA, after decades of military industrial complex, when that ran its course and we were still having a crisis of capitalism, we got the second wave, the second step of Schachtian economics. The second step of Schachtian economics was the creation of a prison industrial complex. We have a Nazi death economy in the United States. Let's just be real about it, folks. This isn't a free market economy. It's capitalism that made America great, Caleb. It's capitalism. If the USA had a free market neoclassical economy, this country would have fallen apart decades ago. The USA has been going because the government spends money, but there's this Nazi mentality. We can't spend money giving people free college because that's too nice. That's too kind. Yeah, we're going to spend money in war. That's mean. Yeah. Ugh. We can't spend money giving people health care. No, that's too kind. That's too compassionate. So we're going to spend money locking up criminals, locking up people in jail. Yeah. You know, it's this settler mentality. It's like there's certain people, I'm sure you've all met them, they just can't stand to be nice. I kid you not. I mean, it's beyond me. They just cannot stand to be nice. I mean, have you met it's weird. I think it's part of the settler mentality, right? But it's like the idea of helping somebody else, the idea of being kind to somebody else, the idea of someone suffering and we ought to help them just makes them mad. This is like the Ayn Rand libertarian stuff. It's like they understood that compassion is weakness, that helping other people is wrong, and other people, if they're poor, it's their own damn fault and they need to get out of here and I'm mad. It's weird. I would sit in college classes and we'd read statistics about unemployment and poverty and they would just get so angry. The notion that somebody else is suffering and society has an obligation to help them is so threatening to their worldview. It's very scary. It's very, very scary. And a lot of those people believe in free market stuff. But the reality is that mindset, that settler anti-solidarity mindset flows all through U.S. society. It really does. It flows all through U.S. society. There's just a lot of people in the USA who just can't stand the thought of helping someone else. Compassion is weakness. Solidarity is weakness. Collectivism, it's me against the world. Everyone should work hard. If you just, you can do anything you want if you just work hard enough. If everyone just flexes hard, they'll all be billionaires. And it's a certain mindset. And if you have that mindset, but you realize that the government needs to spend money, well, then the government can spend money on prisons and locking people up and punishing people. Yeah, the government can spend money on wars and bombs and tanks to fight commies but the government cannot give people free healthcare, cannot give people free education. This is a death economy. That's death economy, right? I'm not saying that the USA is equivalent of Nazi Germany in this moment or anything like that. You're missing the point. I'm saying that there are economic principles that were applied in the Third Reich by the economist Hallomer Schacht. And those are the principles through which our leaders in the United States have attempted to manage the U.S. economy. Schachtian economics. Prisons for profit, war profiteering. That's what we have in the United States. Death economy. It's death economy. That is the reality. They preach free market economy in the United States. That's what's preached. You go to the universities, neoclassical economics, neoliberalism, Milton Friedman. That's for people that are stupid. No, I'm serious. That's That's for people that are stupid enough to believe it, right? That's for the masses. Free to Choose by Milton Friedman. That's all. That's for people. That's you're supposed to swallow that. You're supposed to believe that. That's for the masses. That's for average people who want to get into economics, and it's to explain to you that profits are good and socialism is evil, and if we just have the government out of things and profits are corporate, that's propaganda for the masses. What they really believe in is Shaktian economics. They know they need the government to spend money, but they want the government to spend money on militarism. They know they need the government to spend money, but they need the government to spend money on prisons for profit. Right? They have no problem with the government spending money just so long as it doesn't help people. Right? Because helping people is weakness. Right? They're appealing to the worst in people. They tell the story about Nazi Germany. Right? The children in school would be read a story about a rabbit running away from an angry, hungry wolf. At the end of the story, the wolf devours the rabbit. And then they say to the class of school children, they say to them, who's the victim in this story? And of course, the children, being human beings, say, well, this poor rabbit who just wants to live and this wolf is eating him. And the teacher says, no, the victim is the wolf because the rabbit is resisting, and the wolf is the natural superior of the rabbit. And by resisting, that rabbit is depriving the wolf of his natural place in the hierarchy. That's the Nazi death economy mindset. Right? You worship strength. You worship power. You worship rich and wealth. You worship brute force and military strength, and you abhor and have contempt for those who are suffering, who are without, right? That's Nazi philosophy. That's Nazi economics. It's not exactly what Friedrich Nietzsche said. It's a distortion of what Friedrich Nietzsche said, but it's what the Nazis pushed. And they pushed it in their schools, and it was reflected in their economy. Again, did they have a problem with the government spending money? No, just don't spend it on average people, right? And we very much in the United States, our culture has a huge amount of that. Right? Our settler culture, the Odinism, right? Odinism. I've talked a lot about American Odinism and the Odinist mindset. And that Odinism, right? In ancient Germany, before Germany was Christianized by the Roman Empire, what did people do? They worshipped Odin, the god of grit, valor, and sacrifice. And when in ancient Germany, when the Norsemen were dying on their beds, they wanted to go to heavens, they would take a knife and slice themselves open in the hope that Odin, the god of grit and valor, would think that they had been killed in a battle and would then allow them into heaven, because the highest way of being was to be a warrior, was to be one who was going hard and sacrificing and killing on the battlefield and risking and strength. And, this was the view of the Norsemen. This was the view of the Goths and the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths and the Vandals. This was the religion. This was the religion of the Vikings. That was the Germanic belief. And the Nazis, interestingly, as much as they officially claimed to be Christian, there was a whole lot. If you read, Alfred Rosenberg, who was one of the big theoreticians of the Nazis, he pushed this kind of paganism. They worshipped Odin. Odinism, right? And that Odinist values, Odinist beliefs, a lot of the Protestant work ethic stuff, and Calvin and stuff is Odinist. It's a reassertion of some of these Odinist values, right? This notion is that if God loves you, you'll have lots of money. So therefore, the way to be good is to work hard and have lots of money, because then that'll prove that God loved you or something, right? I mean, and American culture has a big element of, we're very German in the United States of America. What's the most popular food? We got hamburgers, that's from Hamburg, Germany. We got hot dogs, aka Frankfurters, right? Coleslaw, most common last name in the United States is Miller, which is Mueller, right? I mean, that Odinism, the Odinist mentality, has found its way into the United States of America, right? I mean, that this is a big part of what we're about. And the fact that we have adopted death economy, Shaktian Nazi economics in many ways. We haven't done it like the Third Reich did. In Germany, they set up a fascist state. They implemented these economics, boom, 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 created, first there was an economic boom, and then that economic boom started to slow down about 5 years later, and then they started a world war, and millions of people died. That's not what we're doing over here, right? It's not like that. We have implemented Shaktian economics very gradually. First, the military-industrial complex for a couple decades. We still got them now. Prison industrial complex. I mean, it's gradual, right? It's not the same kind of situation at all. But it's a reflection of the same kind of values, right? Everyone knows that capitalist neoclassical economics doesn't work. It doesn't work. You have to have the government spend money because of overproduction. You have to control the problem of overproduction. The capitalist, the worker cannot buy back the products he produces, right? I've explained it before. It's a basic mathematical formula. The wages paid to the worker in the process of production are never equivalent to the price of the product. Just doesn't work that way. The capitalist wouldn't make a profit. So, as a result, you have to have the government stimulating the economy to some way or other. But there is this mentality that we have to do it in this Odinist, cruel, death economy way. And that's the problem. That's the problem. Roosevelt didn't think that way. The Soviet Union and China didn't think that way. But for whatever reason, in the United States, since the end of the Second World War, we've adopted death economy. And there are different manifestations of it. On the right, it manifests itself in this war on social programs. On the left, it manifests itself in this kind of belief in primitivism and that growth is bad and that we overpopulation. That is the problem. We have very much adopted kind of this death economy, pessimistic worldview. The way to save our economy, according to both the left and the right, is with destruction. The right believes the way to save the economy is to cut, right? We're going to cut, food stamps. We're going to cut food stamps. We're going to cut government jobs. We're going to cut wages. We're going to cut social spending, cut healthcare. That's going to save the economy. The left believes the way to save the economy is people need to be less. They need to want less, right? They need to be not as concerned about stuff. We need to get rid of, of all the coal power plants and replace them with windmills. We all need to have electricity for only an hour a day because it's all good for the environment. We all need to stop procreating. We need to reduce the population, and that in the it's a nicer sounding thing, but it's the same idea. The belief of the left in the United States and the right in the United States is the same. That the way to get out of this crisis is with destruction. Do we do it gradually, in a kind of nice, voluntary, environmental, anti-consumerist way? Is that how we go backward? Or do we go backward with cuts and prisons and war? How do we go backwards? That's the debate. That is the terms of the debate in the United States. The left says we go backward nicely and collectively and singing Kumbaya. And the right says we go backward meanly and cruelly and harshly. But they all agree that the way we're going to get out of this economic crisis is to move backward. And what I am telling you, and what China has proved to the world, and what Russia has proved to the world, and what has been proved to the world over and over again, is that we can fix this crisis by going forward. We don't have to move backward. We don't have to move backward. We don't have to go backward. Folks, there is no limit to growth. There is only a limit to profits. There is no limit to growth. There's only a limit to profits. There is no limit to growth. There is only a limit to profits. The only reason that you would think that we have to go backward, the only reason you would think we have to go backward is because you think that we can't escape capitalism. Sure, in order to have capitalism, we have to go backward. No question about it. If we're going to maintain capitalism, we have to go backward. Global warming, fossil fuels, we would have to go backward, right? I mean, automation, all kinds of people not having jobs, we would have to go backward. If you believe in capitalism, if you believe in profits, you think we have to go backward, right? Then there's clearly a limit to growth. But if you can understand that if the banks, factories, and industries were organized to serve public good and not profits, if we had a rationally planned economy, if you can understand that, you can realize that we don't have to go backwards. We don't have to go backwards, folks. We do not have to go backwards. There is no limit to growth. There is only a limit to profits. There is no limit to growth. There is only a limit to profits. Automation would be a good thing in a socialist society. It would mean there's less work for everyone to do. However, under capitalism, it creates poverty. There would be no opposition. There would be nothing barring fusion energy. I think if we had socialism in this country, we would have fusion energy in a year. China, what China is doing, sending rovers to the moon to collect helium-3, funding huge amounts of fusion energy resource, they know that we have to get off fossil fuels. Climate change is a reality, folks, and we have to get off fossil fuels. But we cannot do it by just reducing the energy level. We're not going to do that. If you just replace all the coal power plants and all the oil with windmill, it's not going to work. Solar panels aren't going to cut it. We have to find a more efficient energy source. Fusion energy is the future. And thank you, Western communists, for agreeing with me. Fusion energy is the future. There is no limit to growth. Why don't we have fusion energy? Profits. Big oil companies know that fusion energy would put them out of business. Look who the richest people in the world are. Wall Street. Chase Bank, ExxonMobil, BP, that's HSBC Bank, Royal Dutch Shell, Chevron, all those people would be out of a job if we got off of oil. Fusion energy would put them all out of business. And that would end the fact that the world economy was centered around the West. Right? Why does Wall Street and London rule the world? Because they control the oil, and our economy is centered around oil. You ever buy anything plastic? Oil. Right? You ever ride in an airplane? Oil. You ever drive a car? Oil. Oil is the order that we live in. We live in an oil-based economic order. China knows that's a trap. That's a trap for humanity, and they have socialism in China. They have a rationally planned economy. They control the means of production. The Chinese government says, we are going to fund like hell fusion energy. We are going to send a rover to the moon to collect helium-3. We are going to go all out. We are going to go all out to have fusion. And Russia has said the same thing. International cooperation. Read what was said by Russian President Vladimir Putin. All out for fusion energy. Iran is an oil country. It's like oil is their main commodity. Iran says we are going to go all out for fusion energy, right? Iran funds fusion energy research like crazy. All the economies in the world where profits are not in command, where the state is controlling the means of production, are saying all out for fusion energy. We need fusion energy badly. Fossil fuels isn't going to work. The oil-based economic order is not going to work. And in the West, no. A lot of people don't even know what fusion energy is. A lot of people don't even know what it is. Furthermore, the Wall Street bankers and monopolists don't want to give up their power. They don't want to give up their power. It's that simple. And if the world economy was no longer centered around oil, it would no longer be centered around Wall Street and London. They won't tolerate it. They will not tolerate it. So they're pessimists. And they want to move backwards. China wants to move forward. Russia wants to move forward. Iran wants to move forward. Venezuela wants to move forward. I got some other stuff to say about Venezuela later. Folks, there is no limit to growth. There's only a limit to profits. There is no limit to growth. There's only a limit to profits. But the limit to profits is approaching faster. It is right there on the horizon. The automation crisis and mass unemployment, the climate change debacle and disaster, super hurricanes, folks, goodness gracious. The limit to profits is right in front of our face. We are living in the goddamn the limit to profits. We are living in the limit to profits. This is the end. This is the end This is the moment where the profit system has to be gotten rid of. There is a limit to profits, and it's upon us. We cannot have a profit-based economy any longer, but we can have growth. We can have growth. We can do what human beings naturally do. We can expand our living conditions. We can build a better life. We can resume human progress. Human history can resume. The reason that we are facing a global crisis right now is because there is no limit to growth. There's only a limit to profits. And in the face of profits playing themselves out on a global scale, we need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Folks, I hope you enjoyed all of that. Wow, that's my worldview. That's how I see things, right? This is the moment that we are living in historically. But what's on people's minds? What else is on people's minds? Someone wants to shoot me another super chat. I'll happily answer your question. People want to just throw things out there. I'll try to follow what's in the chat. If you want me to see it for sure, it better be a super chat. But what's up on people's minds today? What's your favorite band? Caleb says Music Man 32. That's interesting. That's a good question. I like folk music. I always have. I like a lot of that old folk music. Brothers Four and the Highwaymen, stuff like that. Kingston Trio. I like folk music, but I'm really into classical music. I like Beethoven, Bach, Mozart. I actually have kind of a ritual. Every morning, I wake up, I drink my unnamed diet beverage as I'm waking up in the morning, and I put on Bach, Beethoven, or Mozart. And before I go to bed every night, I lay there in the bed and I try to put on some Bach, Beethoven, or Mozart because that music is not overly emotional. I think that a lot of the music out there is way, way too emotional. And I will admit I have a vice. And I actually do consider it a vice, right? One of my vices is drinking Diet Coke. Another one of my vices is listening to lots of 1960s rock and roll. I will listen to the Rolling Stones. I will listen to the Beatles. But I know that stuff isn't good for me, right? But sometimes, you just want to get through the day. You want to chill. You want to listen to some music. And sure, and it's okay within reason. But it's kind of like drinking alcohol, right? It gives you kind of an emotional rush, but in excess, right? You want to be rationally and clear-headed, you can't listen to that stuff too much, right? Just like you can't drink, I drink too much Diet Coke. I probably listen to a little too much rock music, right? I'll even listen to some of the stupid pop songs that are popular just because it helps you get through the day, right? You turn on Party in the USA, Miley Cyrus, it helps you get through the day, right? You're trying to get through, you're trying to, type something or get a task done, you put on some of that stupid pop music. It gives you a little bit of a rush. It gives you a little bit of energy. It stimulates you, but it's not good for you. Right? So I try to keep it to folk music. I try to keep it to classical music, but I have my vices, right? I try to, like you try to eat healthy food, but sometimes you gotta eat that donut or whatever, I consider rock music to be a little bit of a vice, but I haven't completely given it up. And it's also important. Let's be real. It's very important. To understand rock music, to feel the emotions from it. You can't be emotionless. You can't be a robot, right? You gotta have energy, right? And that rock music is important, but you have to understand rock music is pure emotion. It's pure emotion. It's emotional manipulation. It's like Wagner. Listen to the song Stairway to Heaven. Listen to Siegfried's Funeral March. That's emotional manipulation. Right? I think Wagner's a little more sophisticated than Led Zeppelin, but it's the same kind of thing. It's emotional manipulation, right? They're playing on your emotions. And it's amazing. It's very powerful and it's good stuff, but at the same time, it's stimulating you emotionally, not intellectually. You listen to the whole Ninth Symphony by Beethoven. He's stimulating you all right, but he's stimulating you intellectually, right? It's very emotional, but the emotions come from intellectual work. He's helping you to think. As you guys see here, I'm full of passion. I get fired up when I talk about this stuff. And that, Siegfried's Funeral March, Stairway to Heaven, Kansas, Carry On, My Wayward Son. This is all emotionally charged. It's highly emotionally charged stuff. And you need emotions to get through life. And you have feelings and all of that. But there's too much of a focus on that. We've lost our rational minds. Our rational minds on some level are suppressed, and we need to be more in control of ourselves. We need to be more rational, and that's why this ritual of listening every day, before I go to bed, before I wake up, Mozart, Beethoven, Bach. It's helpful. It's very helpful. But yeah, I like folk music too, right? I just got into this sea shanty. Leave Her, Johnny, Leave Her, about like sailors leaving their ship. I love sea shanties. I remember when I was a kid, my parents would be riding in the car and we'd all be singing sea shanties, a capital ship for an ocean trip when the walloping window blind. I don't know. What do you do with a drunken sailor? What do I like sea shanties. I like folk music. I like Irish traditional folk. I like that stuff. It's nice. I like it. And it's folk music. It's not like rock music. It's not unhinged emotion. There's a steady rhythm to it usually. A lot of folk music is very male. There's women folk too, but a lot of it is very, very male. And, that's how I am. I am very, Caleb and his family singing she shanties is good, clean fun we all expected. Well, thank you, Huey Long. I don't know. I had a friend. There's a friend of mine. I hope he's watching. And I remember he described me as the most wholesome person he'd ever met. And I asked him, what does wholesome mean? And he said, you are just a wholesome fellow. You're a small town, good golly, smiley face. I don't know. I live in New York City. I'm into, Marxism and socialism. I've traveled all over the world. But yes, sure, Can you talk about the conflict between Stalin and Shostakovich, John L.? I don't know specifically too much about it. What I will say is that Shostakovich's music was one of the greatest achievements of the Soviet Union, right? That music was amazing, right? People say, oh, the Soviet Union was such an oppressive society. No one ever invented anything. No one ever did anything creative. It was so oppressive and horrible, and that's not true. Shostakovich, they were ballet performances that were epically amazing. Sergei Eisenstein. Watch Battleship Potemkin, right? Watch any of this stuff. People did amazing stuff in the Soviet Union in terms of art and music. They did some amazing, amazing stuff. Shostakovich was an amazing composer. That is good stuff, the great music. I don't know, because a lot of what we hear about Shostakovich's music, I remember when I was in college and I had good friends that were at the conservatory, and they would tell me that they were told what stuff meant in Shostakovich's music, but it was never confirmed. They were told, well, this part of the music is the state ordering him to be happy, and it's anti-communist, but how is that true? Is that true? We don't know that. There is a lot of conjecture, a lot of assumption, right? Jyoti Brar, who I interviewed, she gave a great presentation, and she said, every time when she got her music degree, she has a degree in music. It was like they couldn't ever let the Soviet Union do anything good, right? The Soviet Union created Shostakovich, but it was like Shostakovich did it breathing from the barrel of Stalin's gun, right? All these amazing gymnastic performances. Well, the state had pushed them so hard. It was like they can't ever, anything good that the Soviet Union did has to be like in spite of their system. And they did amazing things. And then people make all these statements. The Soviet Union never accomplished anything. The Soviet Union never had any good achievements. And then when they do acknowledge them, they find a way, well, that's not really, it's pretty sad. And the Soviet Union did amazing things in terms of computer technology, amazing achievements in terms of music. Shostakovich, that was the 1930s. That was the time of the 5-year plans. And the fact that the orchestras and that the average people, that's one of the things that's the most moving to musicians that I know about the Soviet Union, is that the symphony in the Soviet Union was not for snobs. It wasn't for snobs. The Soviet Union, steel workers went to the symphony. The Soviet Union, auto workers went to the symphony. The Soviet Union, coal miners went to the symphony. That average people went and listened to Beethoven and Bach and Mozart. And that there was this understanding that average people could appreciate classical music and did appreciate classical music. Beautiful. It was amazing that, and if you go to Cuba, I remember when I was at the World Festival of Youth and Students, why do you think a lot of millennials have a favorable view of socialism and Marxism, and do you think they understand what it is? Why do I think a lot of millennials have a favorable view of socialism and Marxism? And do I understand what it is? I will answer that question for you. Why do a number of millennials have a favorable view of socialism and Marxism? Very easy. Very easy answer to your question. we have been told for decades and decades in the United States that we cannot do what a lot of other countries in the world do, because if we do it, that's socialism or that's Marxism. People say, hey, I don't like the fact that I have to pay, so much money out of my paycheck and go to an insurance company that tries to rip me off. Why doesn't the government just give me health care? Because you can't do that. Well, that's socialism. Hey, I don't like being in student debt for my whole life, and why can't the government just give me education? Can't do that. It's socialism. I don't like the fact that when I work at a coffee shop and sweat and I get paid barely anything, shouldn't they raise the minimum wage? Can't do that. That's socialism. Right? Well, hey, I don't like the fact that big corporations pay barely any taxes, but I have to pay taxes. That's not fair. I mean, why not tax Amazon and ExxonMobil and make them pay their fair share? Can't do that. That's socialism. So millennials, having heard this their whole life and facing an economic future that is much harder than what their parents' generation faced, have decided to take on this kind of cynical attitude. Fine, I'm a socialist then. Fine, I'm a socialist. I don't like paying student debt, and if that makes me a socialist, fine, Dad, I'm a socialist. Deal with it. And they're justified in their sentiments. That is why young people in the United States like socialism, is because stupid people have been telling us for years that we can't have things that in other countries are taken for granted because that's socialism. And so they're like, fine, I'm a socialist. I guess I'm a socialist, Dad. What? If I have to, I guess I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. I will check out this wandering earth. I'll Google it. Thank you. Thank you, Lincolnite. But yeah, that's what it's about. And do they actually understand what it is? No. And Bernie Sanders doesn't advocate what it actually is. Bernie Sanders is advocating a more egalitarian Keynesian welfare state. He doesn't want the workers to control the means of production. He doesn't want a government-run economy. He's made that abundantly clear. Bernie Sanders and he's actually made statements that are interesting. He said, I'm a democratic socialist, not a socialist. Bernie Sanders, his program, the central planks of his program, free healthcare, free college, that would make us France. That would make us Norway. That would make us Sweden. That would make us Germany. And those are all capitalist countries. Those are all very capitalist countries. It is a repudiation of Milton Friedman. It is a repudiation of Ayn Rand. It is a repudiation of, what's that guy? The Federal Reserve guy, Alan Greenspan. It's a repudiation of economic neoliberalism. It is saying this notion that the state, and profits should always come first and the state should never give anybody anything. It's a repudiation of that, and it's good, and it's necessary. Do they actually understand what socialism is? Most of them don't, and they should. They should understand what it is. And that's what I hope to accomplish. I hope that my think tank, and the other people that form it, not just me, I hope that when we establish the Center for Political Innovation, we can take huge strides in getting Americans to actually understand what socialism is. To actually understand that if you have the state organized and control the means of production, and if you have an economy that functions for the benefit of the people and not profits, it can be great. Great things can happen. We don't have to look backward. There is no limit to growth. There's only a limit to profits. We need a government of action to fight for working families. And yes, I am forming a think tank. As I announced previously on the live, April 18th, we are having the founding conference, Weehawken, New Jersey. Be there. Mark your calendar. Book your flight. Book your Greyhound bus. Be there. The website's going to be up soon, and you can register. You need to be there because we need to get this done. I don't take sides. I'm not endorsing any candidate. I disagree with Bernie very strongly on foreign policy. But I'm telling you, folks, that we need to educate the American public about what socialism actually means and what socialism has actually accomplished, what imperialism and capitalism actually are, and why they need to be gotten rid of. I would love to do that with Pepe Escobar. If he's available, I would love to stream with him. He's brilliant. I met him in Iran at a conference, and he's a brilliant guy. I like him, great. No, he doesn't agree with everything I've ever said. I don't agree with everything he's ever said. He's a great fellow, and I'd be happy to I'd be happy to do that with him. Thanks for asking. But yes, I mean, there is no limit to growth. There's only a limit to profits. And we have got our work cut out for us. That's why I'm establishing this think tank. We need to do it. And more details will be coming. Website's up. You can pre-register. It'll all be great. If you can't come, give a donation, right? There'll be a donate button. We'll need your donation because it's getting expensive. Some big names are flying in. It's turning into a big thing. I'm happy to do it because I believe in this. You know, folks, if I was a flim flam man, and there are plenty of flim flam men out there, I would have given up a long time ago, right? I got my job, I do my reporting, and but I really do believe in socialism, no question about it. And I know, folks, I'll be honest. This isn't a trendy thing to say in left circles. I love my country. I don't agree with a lot of the things my country has done over the years, but I love my country. I'm not a nationalist. I don't think my country is better than other countries. I don't think that I don't go around saying this is the greatest country in the world. I don't call other countries shithole countries, but I love my country. I walk down the streets of the United States of America, and I love you. I love my people, and I'm worried. I'm worried about the people back in Ohio. You know, how many classmates of mine, 3 or 4 at least, the people I went to school with have died from opioids. You know, I mean, the roads are crumbling. I mean, this is a disaster. I love my country, and I love my people. United States of America, this is my country. This is where I come from. I eat McDonald's, folks. I'm very American. I may try to resist that. I may have anger about, social conformity and some of the bad things about our culture, but I love my country. And our country is in a mess because of capitalism and imperialism, right? We made a deal with the devil. I'll be real. White American middle class, we made a deal with the devil. We pulled a Dr. Faustus. We said in the 1950s, hey, if you give us TVs, you give us radios, and you give us refrigerators and nice houses in the suburbs, we'll support you in Vietnam. We'll support you in Korea. You can bomb the crap out of Vietnam. You can bomb the crap out of Korea. You can repress the African-American community as long as we keep getting our TVs, as long as we keep getting our radios, as long as we have our high standard of living. We made a deal with the devil. We signed a pact with Satan. We made a deal with the devil. And as a result of that, we got houses, we got cars, we got TV sets, we got refrigerators, we got vacuum cleaners. But all those TVs and all those radios and all those vacuum cleaners were dripping with blood. The blood of people in Vietnam, the blood of people in Korea, the blood of people in the Chicano people in the South or in the Southwest driven across their land. And when things are acquired in an impure way, when you get money from the devil, it's tainted, it's corrupted, and it doesn't last. And Satan did not keep his promise to America. And the white middle class of America made a deal with the devil. And now we are seeing down the road that the devil doesn't keep his promises. We supported their wars. We supported their mass incarceration of the African American community. We supported their impoverishment of people around the world. We loved our TVs. We loved our radios. But now it's time to pay the piper. And we realize that we're wrong. We were wrong. We never should have made that deal with the devil. Never. The white Americans should have said the black people are our friends. The white Americans should have said the people of Korea and Vietnam are our friends. The white Americans should have said the people of Cuba are our friends. The people of Latin America are our friends. We made a deal with the devil, and now the chickens have come home to roost. And millions of Americans are waking up and going, oh shit. Oh shit, what did we do? We ate fruit from a poison tree. and it is now making us sick. The curse that was hanging over America is finally coming down on us, and it's an epic disaster. I would love to go to Australia, David Fox. Thank you for the super chat. Thanks for the other super chat, Western Communist as well. The curse that was cast has come down upon us. And this is a moment of reckoning. It's a moment of reckoning for the United States of America. This is a moment of reckoning. Some of us knew all along what was going on. We knew that we were making a deal with the devil. We knew all along, or maybe we didn't consciously know. We had a feeling, right? 1947, as World War II was ending, the Cold War was beginning. There was a hit country gospel song, bluegrass. You'd better pray to the Lord when you see those flying saucers. Could be the coming of the judgment day. All over the United States, as the Cold War was beginning, people started seeing UFOs and thinking UFOs were out there. The term flying saucer became very popular. And a lot of Americans they knew something was wrong, right? The Cold War was starting. Military spending was escalating, but the standard of living was shooting up, and a lot of Americans in their guts knew something was wrong. McCarthyism, right? I mean, there was fear. They knew something wasn't right. Something was rotten in the state of Denmark. Something was rotten in the United States of America. We knew this American dream, this bribe we got to make us loyal to empire, something wasn't right about it. And now it's all come crashing down in our face. It's all come crashing down in our face. We made that deal with the devil. We supported their war against the Vietnamese people. We supported their war against the Korean people. We supported their coups. We cheered. We made big mistakes. We thought we were better than the people of the Middle East and the Iranians. We thought we were better than the people of Latin America. We thought we were better than the black people. We thought we were better than the Chicano people. We thought we were the greatest country in the world. We were the greatest people in the world. We really made big mistakes, and I don't back away from that. And I was one of those. I wasn't the only one. I feel like, and I'm coming to this game pretty late. I was born in 1987, folks. I got here way late in the game. But all along, there were people, communists, socialists, who were sounding the alarm, going, hey, Jim Crow is oppressing people. Hey, these wars are wrong. Hey, there were Loraxes in the United States of America. There were John the Baptists. There were voices crying out in the wilderness, trying to wake people up, trying to urge people about what was going on, and they didn't want to listen to us. It was inconvenient to acknowledge what we had to say, and we were on the outside. But now, it's all coming out. We were the voice crying out in the wilderness saying capitalism is wrong, capitalism is oppressing people all over the world, capitalism has all these internal contradictions, there's going to be an economic crisis, and no one paid any attention to us. And they said, get away from me, commie. Go away. I got to go see Back to the Future. I got to go, dance to records. And, well, now everyone is starting to realize that we were right. And it's a tough pill to swallow. It's a tough pill to swallow. It is a tough, disgusting, thick, gross-tasting pill we have to swallow. We were wrong. We made a deal with the devil. We ate fruit from a poison tree. And now we have royally fucked ourselves. I don't use foul language very often, but I just did. Where do we go from here? What do we do next? What do we do? What do we do now? we were riding on that capitalism train. We thought that because we were going to be true believers in the American system and we were going to support wars and imperialism and we were going to build a military industrial complex and we were going to build a prison industrial complex. What do we do? What do we do at this point? What do we do now? Where do we go from here? What's the next step? Well, I have long said that I believe this country can be reborn. Not made great again, not made into a strong imperialist country again, not made great again, but reborn. We can be reborn on values of solidarity and brotherhood and compassion. We can be reborn, refounded, reestablished. We can start over again. We can refound the country on different values. We can change. You know, one of the biggest concepts in American history, it's interesting, you go throughout American history, there's a lot of things people believe. One of the biggest beliefs that people have in America is you can fail and you can start over again. Right? That's a big part of American beliefs. It's really big. I mean, first of all, a lot of the settlers who came here, what were they? They were people who screwed up in Europe, couldn't get by, screwed up. They came here for a new beginning. You can be reborn. You can start again. What is the most beloved American hymn? Amazing Grace. What's it about? A guy had a slave ship. He was going to Africa to take a bunch of Africans and take them back to the USA as slaves. And a storm came, and he had a religious moment of revelation. And he turned that boat around, and he stopped being a slave trader. That's what the great song, Amazing Grace, the theme song of the Second Great Awakening, right? The big abolitionist religious movement that swept this country. And that was about people starting over again. We as a country have to start over again. We have to start over again. We have to start over again. We have to realize that we made mistakes. We have to start over again. We have to have a new country. We have to rebuild America on solid foundations. That's what we have to do. And the first step toward it, we need a government of action that will fight for working families. In America, they say, the government is the best that governs least. Free market, laissez-faire, let everyone do whatever they want to do. Oh no. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We should stop judging politicians by what they say, but instead judge them by what they do. We have do-nothing government in the United States right now. They get into D.C., there's gridlock, nothing happens. We need a government of strength, a government of will, a government that will take the dramatic moves necessary in order to get us out of the crisis. We need a strong government. We need a government of strength. We need a government of action. A government of action that will fight for working families. Not a government that'll roll over. Not a government of pessimism and weakness, but a strong government of action. We'll say that's America's oil, that's America's timber, that's America's coal, that's America's natural gas, and it belongs to the people of America. The profits from our natural resources will go into the public budget. No more profits from natural resources. The energy markets, all of that is government property. And we're going to use it to build hospitals and schools. And we're going to use it to build high-speed railway from one end of the country to the other. And we're going to use it to fund fusion energy resources so we can get out of this mess of fossil fuels. We are going to use the profits from our natural resources to get us out of the rut created by profits and war. We need a government of action that will say that banking and the lending of money should be a monopoly in the hands of the state. Money should not be lended because bankers think they can make profits from it. Money should be lended in the interest of the public. And instead of having a creditor class that makes money by having money, that lends money, that has the government in debt to them, instead of having a Federal Reserve rip-off system, that instead we have a national bank, a state national bank that lends money in the interest of the public, and when the loans are paid back, it goes into the public budget. The control of finance and lending should be in the hands of the state. You should get a credit card from the state. You should get money to start a new business from the state. The lending of money at interest should be state-run. And with the proceeds from state-run lending of money, from the proceeds of America's coal, America's timber, America's natural gas, we need to completely rebuild the country in terms of infrastructure, number one. And number two, we need to start guaranteeing people the right to a job, the right to health care, the right to education. We need to put into practice that second Bill of Rights that Franklin Delano Roosevelt proposed prior to his death. Those are my 4 steps. Mass infrastructure development program to rebuild the country, nationalization of natural resources, nationalization, state control of the banking system, enact Roosevelt's Bill of Rights. And if we did that, if we had a government that was powerful enough, not just to talk about those 4 planks, but actually had the strength to put them into practice, to mobilize millions of people into motion, to force by sheer force of will, to make those 4 things happen. If we had a government of action that fought for working families and had the ability to push these things through, to get all those powerful interests that would oppose it, like the gas companies, like the bankers, like every big monopoly, if we had the ability to shove them back, if we had a government of strength, if we had a government of action that could mobilize millions of Americans, push them into political motion, get them to the point that they could force back the will of profiteers and bankers, force back these special interests. If we could do that, if we had that ability, if we had a government of action, at that point, socialism would be just around the corner. It would only be a matter of time before the major industries were under public good. It would be only a matter of time before the state was controlling the means of production. At that point, the USA would basically be China. And growth would go sky high. Fusion energy we'd have fusion energy in 5 years. We'd have fusion energy in 5 years. We would have artificial intelligence doing all kinds of things. I could see a one-day work week, folks. I could see a one-day work week. I could see amazing things happening. And our international relations would drastically change because it wouldn't be about maintaining a monopoly for capitalist corporations. It wouldn't be about helping oil monopolies and bankers rule the world. No. We would want other countries to be wealthy because then we could make more money trading with them. We would have a win-win economy. We would build a high-speed railway from the northern part of Canada all the way down to the southern cone in Chile and Argentina. You would be able to get on a train in Alaska and go all the way down to Argentina in 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. It would be amazing what we would accomplish, right? It would be unprecedented what we would achieve, right? I mean, you talk about global warming and droughts. We would start taking water from the polar ice caps and build a huge irrigation system. And we would have a farming boom in the Midwest like you'd never seen. It would be amazing. You think we're producing lots of corn now? You think we're producing all of that now? We would have a huge irrigation system, something like Gaddafi's man-made river, in Libya. It would be amazing. Plus, we'd be off of fossil fuels. It would be only a matter of time before we were on Mars, colonizing Mars. We would have cities on the moon. You couldn't imagine what we could do. When we got to the point that we were no longer limited by profits, if profits were no longer in command, if popular power were in command, and the irrationality of greed were gotten rid of, that ultimate vision of a world with so much material abundance, so much prosperity, so much hope, so much peace, that the need for any kind of government would just kind of fade away. The need for any kind of coercion would just kind of fade away. People could just kind of do what they want to do what they feel like doing, take what they need, right? From each according to his own ability, from each according to his needs. It would be quite easily attainable. In a state of vast material abundance. Right? Karl Marx used the phrase, from each according to his own ability, from each according to his needs, to describe communism. But everyone knows where Karl Marx acquired that phrase. It comes from the Bible. It's a biblical allusion. Acts 4, verse 34 through 35. And each was made available to every man according to his need. And it's very doable. Very, very doable. Because there is no limit to growth. There is only a limit to profits. There is no limit to growth. There is only a limit to profits. There is no limit to growth. There is only a limit to profits. And profits are running out. The crisis, the limit to profits is before us. Profits cannot withstand the computer revolution. Profits cannot withstand climate change. Profits, greed, militarism, destruction, death economy cannot withstand profits. We are on the moment where capitalism cannot survive any longer. What we need more than ever is a government of action that will fight for working families. A government of action. A government that has no fear about pushing people into motion to fight for their rights and demand justice. A government that is not scared to mobilize the public. A government that brings people into the democratic process. That is the hope for the future of this country. Folks, I'm having a great time talking to you. I hope you can make it on April 18th. I hope you can help out, even if you can't make it. We are moving towards some really exciting times in this country. And in the next 9 months, the conversations we are having here are going to be exploding. They're going to be everywhere. People are everywhere are going to be talking about what we're talking about. So keep in mind, are you going to seize this moment and make the most of it? Are you going to help out? Are you going to do what needs to be done in order to get us out of the crisis? I haven't read Ted Reese, but that's interesting. I haven't read that book, honestly. Are you going to do what needs to be done to get us out of this mess? Are you going to take the action necessary? Will you make the choice to choose a life that matters, to choose to take value? Will you take history into your own hands? You are on the precipice. Do you have the courage? Do you have the boldness to make the right decision? Will you be one of those who saw history had offered them a challenge and they took it up? Well, if you are, I hope you come and join us on April 18th. I hope you join the Center for Political Innovation, and I hope you help us do this right work. because we are on the verge of doing something really, really, really exciting. Folks, a new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Have a good night, folks. Always fun.